and turn it over to Manager Moser.
Okay, well, I don't have a lot to say, so I'm just going to turn it immediately over to our first budget review for this evening. It's economic development. Gianna?
Good evening, counselors. Jana Richards, Economic Development Director. I apologize, I was not here back in April when the other departments were able to present. The economic development budget is fairly similar to what was presented last year. There's just two small minor changes. One an increase and one a decrease. The decrease, we have a shared position, or we had a shared position. Yes, sir.
Oh,
I'm lost. Where the hell is it?
It's about.
It's like 3 things.
You said it was in order. Jeez.
4.
Let me know when you find it.
Sorry to
No, it's
time
okay.
out. but-
No, I would rather have you have it in front of you.
Okay.
Why don't I go through the packet first? before
Sure.
you mind?
None at all.
Thank you.
Sure. So the first piece of paper is the tentative agenda for this evening. The second is the year-to-date expense report for the general fund department, printed out today, so it's the most up-to-date expense report. So that's just for your general information. The third piece is the administrative budget summary from section 4. That's just some updates to some numbers that you already have in your budget book, so you can replace the sheets in there. And I put the most recent date and timestamps on the bottom of these so that you can see what are the most recent to go by. Then there's the economic development packet that Jana will be reviewing right now. That'll be the fourth item in your packet. Then the bulk of the outside agencies requests, which I think actually now I've got that slightly out of order, but the thick one would come after the recreation, so it'll be a third. There are some updated recreation numbers as well, the recreation budget summary and the harbor. There's a 2-page thing there. Those are updated numbers from pages that are already in your book. There's also a table of numbers from the recreation that were presented to the Recreation Commission. Somebody at the previous workshop had asked for original request numbers, not just the recommendation of the commission, so that page shows those original numbers as well. There's an updated number for the wastewater department because there were some small errors previously, so just putting that in there to put in your book. And then there are several items related to the capital requests. There's an updated master sheet of the recommendations and some additional requested documentation that had not been previously in your book. So it is largely in the order that we're going through on the agenda tonight.
Is there a quiz in the morning?
Yes, there is.
But unfortunately, we are now out of time. Now that we've gone through all of that.
Sorry, Jana.
So, but the fourth item in is Jana's packet.
And may I just apologize for not asking for your recognition, but I just,
Okay.
okay.
You-
Thank you
are
very
you all
much.
set? No worries.
And thank you,
Okay.
Josh.
Yep, so fairly similar to what was presented last year, 2 minor changes. There's a decrease that you'll see, and that's in the payroll line item. That's because there was a shared position between economic development and the planning office. That position is going to be solely within the planning office now, and so you'll see that there'll be a decrease in the economic development budget, and the planning budget was presented a few weeks back that showed the increase there. The increase that is requested is in the printing and advertising line item. This line item was decreased to only $3,000 in last fiscal year. And so the previous year to that, it was $13,000. I'm looking to try to restore that line item closer to what it was in FY 2021. And the reason for that is that I'm working right now with the Ellsworth Business Development Corporation on a promotional website for the city. And we were able to get a $5,000 grant from the Department of Economic and Community Development to go toward that, but I would like some city funds to also go toward it, since it is quite a bit of advertising and promotion for the city, and will also help existing businesses and residents that are here. So overall, there's just a small decrease in the budget of 0.7%. I'm happy to take any questions. Those are the major changes in the budget.
Decreases are good. Oh, increase.
Just give them a
Yes, sir.
chance to go through it.
Sure. I have one more item. So this is for the Union River Center for Innovation. I'm requesting TIF funds be allocated from the unallocated TIF funds to be allocated to the Union River Center for Innovation. So the Union River Center for Innovation was established in 2016. Every year since it began, the city allocated $25,000 every year toward the Union River. I haven't come in front of you for the past 3 years because 3 years ago, in 2019, we applied for a Maine Technology Institute grant. And so at the time, we needed to find a match for that grant, and the city's contribution to the match was $75,000. So at the time, 3 years ago, I asked for all 3 years of funding. That grant is going to end at the end of this fiscal year. And so this year, I'll be requesting $25,000 for the first time in 3 years. But every single year previously, there's been $25,000 that's been allocated out of the TIF funds toward the Union River Center for Innovation.
I'm sorry, where is that in the budget? That is part of this, or?
Nope, so it's a separate, it's a separate request. So the TIF funds don't have to be allocated or non-allocated through the budget cycle, but we feel that it probably makes the most sense to ask and request for it at this point, because what I've tried to do since coming on as working at the Union River Center for Innovation is to have a budget for it and have it be presented as part of the budget cycle. That, because it's TIF funds, it hasn't been done like that previously, but for the past 4 years, that's what I've tried to do.
Does anybody want any further information on TIF?
I would love that. I mean, I feel like
I know.
you've explained it to before, and I think I do
You-
sort of
you've opened
understand
that
it.
box.
I know, but it just, if we're sitting here and we don't, and the public doesn't understand, I know it's really
That's okay.
complicated, so it's the root.
Do you want to give them a summary sheet? Do you have this?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna, you want the, the broad overview?
Yeah, you
Okay.
condense it down, and then if there are questions,
Okay.
to take it deeper.
I'm gonna do my best, all right. So, through the state, we have established TIF districts, tax increment financing districts within the city. The point of the TIF districts is to incentivize development within those districts. What happens is, okay, so there's an original assessed value of the parcels, let's say, that reside within those districts. Over time, the new assessed value should hopefully increase. If somebody purchases one of those properties and builds on it, let's say, the assessed value goes higher. So now you have the difference between what the assessed value is over time and the original assessed value, and what happens is 67% of that is captured into the TIF funds, TIF revenues. That then can be put toward economic development activities within the city. Now, that's super broad explanation of this, but we have an application that had to be submitted to the state that says what you can do, what type of economic development activities you can do with that funds. One of them is the establishment of an economic development department, which is the department that I work in. The other things that can be done is that there can be improvements to the TIF district as a whole. So let's use Beckwith Hill, let's say, is one of the TIF districts, okay? So if we wanted to improve, let's say, some sort of infrastructure within Beckwith Hill, that could be paid for using TIF funding. There's also the ability to use TIF funding toward an expense that feeds the TIF district. So an example of that is Beachland Road was paid for in part by TIF funds because it helps feed the Beckwith Hill district as well as other TIF areas. Then you have TIF funds that can be used outside of community-wide that aren't directed either at a TIF district or help feed a TIF district. A good example of that would be something like quality of life initiatives, trails improvements, trail maintenance, things like that. So that's the super broad overview. What Josh just gave you is a summary of, and I'm only talking about right now the economic development TIF, because that's what affects my department specifically and the requests that I have. There's also housing TIFs that are listed on this summary sheet, but those don't affect my department. So the revenue that comes in on here is shown, and then so if you look at the expenses, so you have the economic development department budget, you have economic development debt, so that's over time. There was
Beachland and Knowlton Park.
Beachland Road and Knowlton Park expenses debt. And then economic development expense, that $25,000 is the request that I'm asking for right now for the Union River Center for Innovation. So those are the three expenses that are tied to the economic development TIF revenue that comes into the city.
It's the assessed value now and over time for property that we own? Or
Nope.
for the property of that whole region?
Yes, property of that region or the
Okay.
district that is basically mapped and then submitted to the state. And so you can't have more than 2% of your land area within a TIF district. That's the threshold.
Yeah.
So what you try to do is plan for where you want to see economic development activities happen within your city so that you capture the highest value in return.
And is it a way for the state to give us money to do things, or are we borrowing against ourselves?
No, you're not borrowing against yourself. It's basically a way of encouraging economic development within certain communities.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Could you say it one more time?
All right. Thank you.
So moving along to recreation, and it's in your packet.
Between some of the materials already in section 10 of your book, and then there's a summary page for the section in what I just gave you, as well as the table of requests.
So it's these two.
Yep.
And then for detail on the recreation budget and the proposal by the rec committee, you want to speak to that, Dale?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
I don't know
chair.
if I'm supposed to interject, but I'm the chair of the rec commission, so if you guys have questions, I can answer them.
Please come up to the podium.
Sure. I don't have anything prepared. We kind of sent that over to you, but I can tell you the process. So we read through, obviously, all the applications. We did ask everyone that was an applicant to present to us at a special meeting on April 12th. So I believe everyone showed up, or at least talked to on the phone. So we made our recommendations based off the applications, the presentations, and our next regular meeting on April 19th is where we discussed and made these recommendations. And I did just want to note that at the time we didn't know, but the garden club did come and present to us, but technically doesn't fall under the recreation budget. Neither does the snowmobile club, even though it sounds like both those probably should, but they don't. So those are separate line items, so we didn't include those in our recommendations. And there was also, I believe, Heart of Ellsworth and the Grand Theater, where maybe we felt some of it didn't fall under the purview of the Recreation Commission, so we didn't make full recommendations for funding. But that doesn't mean, they shouldn't still present to you for probably that funding. And then, I can answer any questions you may have. And a couple of the standouts you might see is, power obviously is going up, so we had a 50% increase there. And then the ice rink maintenance is higher than normal because we need to replace the liner this year, which I don't think we get an exact figure, but I think they were thinking was around $3,000.
Are there a lot of issues with the liner in that rink? We seem to have replaced that 5 times, 6 times.
Yeah, I was wondering that myself. I've actually have not been on the commission very long. I thought it was like 3 years ago in the budget where it was replaced, so I believe the person that was supposed to talk about that hasn't presented to us yet, but that would be a question I would like to ask as well.
Do you know if that's an average lifespan for a liner?
I don't. I mean, it seems short to me, but I don't know much about it.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. Also, Ellsworth Little League. Can you speak to anything on that, please?
We did not, as far as I know, receive anything from them. I believe they might have put an application in, but when we reached out, by email and followed up, we never heard anything. I don't know if anyone's here tonight from Little League, but we just never, it wasn't on our radar.
I know that there were problems with the Little League 3 years ago. Somebody, I forget who it was that sponsored them, dropped the sponsorship, or the sponsorship rules changed by Little League standards. I don't know if it was related to that, the fact that there was no request put in.
Yeah, I'm not positive. I know the question was asked a couple times among the commission, and no one really, I think several people had reached out and we just never heard anything.
All right.
I think the main issue is DeMeyer Field, which the city owns, is the larger issue in terms of these uniforms and things like that, equipment they have. And so that may be the reason they didn't come forward is, but you can see there is a request to address the power issue at DeMeyer.
Okay.
So there's a request to fund Ellsworth outdoor movies, which they haven't happened for the last couple of years. Who's doing that?
It is, I forgot the name of the nonprofit, but.
Maybe Ellsworth Arts for All, I think that's
Yeah,
what
I believe
was
that's it,
before.
exactly.
Okay, so that organization is still.
Yes, still
planning
doing
to
it.
take
So I think
that.
that's their primary purpose of that
Yeah.
nonprofit now.
A question, so for the grand vacation movies, Shakespeare in the Park, and a lot of these specialized programs, are they charging admission for these to the public?
Well, Nick is here, he can probably answer better than I can, but I know the vacation movies are subsidized, so they're $1. I believe half of that is funded through the city and the other half is through those dollar ticket sales. It is in their request. And then Shakespeare in the Park, I believe is free.
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 Waterfront concerts and Shakespeare in the Park are free, and the vacation movies are $1.
Okay. And the YMCA, $62,000, what is that for?
That is, same thing, I have a.
Request, but I'm trying to find the.
Same thing, I think Peter could probably speak better to that. It's in the original application, it's like a 2 or 3 page. It has everything kind of broken down in increments, so it's pretty broad. It did come up in the Recreation Commission as, you know, how much of that fully falls under recreation. I know historically it's always been that way. Is some of that, you know, potentially social services? I do have the packet here, hold on.
Get to the draft Recreation Commission paperwork.
What page?
Oh, here it
Is
is.
there a page?
It's not numbered.
So as you're looking for that, the point you just made, I think, is something for us to perhaps consider as we review the budget going forward, even this year, is although it's in the recreation budget, perhaps we should vet it as a social service request relative to other nonprofit organizations. And the reason that I think it fits better under there is that, for me, the recreation should be really as tied closely to serving Ellsworth residents, and nonprofit organizations, social services, yes, they meet the needs of residents, but it gets a little bit harder to discern and capture that discreetly. And so the reason to support nonprofits would be to ensure that they have those programs available for our residents. And I think that's for me, that's where what I see as the difference between the Recreation Commission and those requests versus social services. So it might be something we can discuss as we go forward.
My point is that if it includes, for example, summer camp, day camp, things along those lines, those are things that people are already paying for out of pocket. And so what is our $62,000 as a city funding when in turn the people who utilize the Y still pay a membership fee, they still have to pay for the childcare, they still have to pay for summer camp, et cetera, so.
Well, if it's okay with you, I think Peter's here somewhere, so he's a better speaker than I am. But yeah, it's broken out here, but some of it is like scholarships for summer camp, some of it is subsidized, memberships. There's quite a few things that are in here, so. Since it is half our budget, if he wants to come up, then.
Councilor Kaplan, do you have any?
No.
Okay. Do you want to see my copy of, do you guys have that copy? Okay, perfect.
I do want to say and extend it to the Rec Commission, being able to sit on that, an appreciation for all the individuals who make up that commission. Obviously, it's all volunteer, like most of our committees and commissions where citizens sit on there. But the amount of work, time, and attention that you did this year in a very short amount of time, because it was still kind of in development. But you pulled this together in terms of looking at, meeting with all these organizations, going through it very carefully, and I just want to extend an appreciation to you and the commission.
And Michelle, to answer your question just broadly, I think what we tried to look at for all of these, including YMCA, was what demographic is it hitting? So it's not just all children or anything like that. So what percentage of the population is it hitting? What's the demographic? So included with the YMCA kind of did, breakdowns per citizen and that type of stuff. But yeah, a lot of it, is, I would say most of it is kind of subsidies in a sense of people that might not be able to afford to get a membership, people who can't afford to go to summer camp, and youth sports programs. So a lot of stuff like that.
I'm looking, and a lot of these things are for more specialized populations, geared towards theater goers or, now the parade, is that the Christmas parade?
Yes, and one last thing on the why, since I have it right here before I answer that, is it was also the free community weekend usage at the Y too. So you don't have to be a member on certain days and times to come use the facility, so that's a piece of it. As far as the parade, yes, the 5,000 is what we got last year, and for the first time, we kind of did the larger tree lighting, which is incorporated in that. The reason it's 8,000 instead of 5,000 is because there's always been that $3,000 line item for the winter carnival, which I've only lived here, I think 5 or 6 years, and I've only ever had one winter carnival, so I think we decided to focus on something else. So the idea this year, potentially, is to do maybe like a New Year's thing or a different kind of winter, festival. And basically we're, be calling it like a winter kind of holiday events line item, which is that 8,000 instead of the 5 and the 3. Sorry.
I'm surprised I don't see anything for 4th of July.
I would love to see something for 4th of July, yes.
Like, a lot of towns have 4th of July fireworks. I understand we still have fireworks in storage somewhere,
Yes.
but nothing for 4th of July.
Yeah, like I said, I'm fairly new to the commission, but I have some plans anyway, but 4th of July would be one of them. So I've been to lots of places for 4th of July around here, but I've never been to Ellsworth. So I've been to Blue Hill, been to Bangalore, been to Bar Harbor. It seems like we're a big enough town to be able to do something, but.
I agree.
The fire department is sitting in the back.
And I think potentially part of the New Year's celebration, if that does come to fruition, would be potentially fireworks too.
Before we move on off of this rec committee, I'd just like to give Nick an opportunity, because 2 of the items from the grant were not brought forward, as you explained, because you weren't sure they really fit under recreation.
Yeah.
So it was the education and the programming. The grant education programs and then programming items.
Thank you for that. You know what, I just heard a valid point come up from looking deeper into it, what really fits under a rec commission. And I guess I can argue for those two, especially the education one. The education funding, the grant only charges kids $3 a ticket. And in the last few years pre-COVID, every student in the Ellsworth Elementary and Middle School attended 1 or more performances at the grant. Most of them is their first exposure to live theater. I always tell the story of the kid who was in kindergarten. I asked him how the show was, and she said, "This is the greatest day of my life." She was 6. But you know what? I'm not going to judge. And that's the only reason we can do that is because of extra funding. We get grants or we get funding from donors, we get funding from the city to make sure that every Ellsworth child can come see something at the grant. So that's real. And we've added outreach in the last few years, which again comes from this funding. And in that outreach, again planned for this year, teaching artists would go to every classroom that's going to attend a show and do a workshop on what they're about to see. It costs money to do that. So I think that's a very valid thing. Is it recreation? It's a good question. Is it a valid thing for the city council to support? I believe so, in some way, especially since it serves every, and hopefully every high school student in the next coming year. Programming, it's another question, right? The grant exists to present live entertainment for the community. As listed in the proposal, the economic impact is pretty profound. It serves the community of Ellsworth, especially the businesses, and it serves the community for them getting to see something at the grant. Is it recreation? That's a good question. That's a really good question. The biggest, I'm a big old softy for the arts. And I'm a big old softy for the grant's mission, which is to foster social interaction. Because I'm a firm believer, after my now 30 years in the arts, that when you bring people together to experience the worst of what mankind and humankind is capable of, you also celebrate what humankind is the best that humankind can celebrate together. And when you bring human beings together to experience that, how profound of effect is that on a community? It can be very profound. And the Grand takes that very seriously and strives to bring social interaction that will perpetuate that common ground and bring us all together, especially with young people. So all the student shows we planned bring in cultures and diversity and arts that we may not have an immediate access to. And therefore, bring the whole world to our community, especially our young people. You didn't know you were going to get that answer, did you? A little profound there. Any questions?
Nick,
Yeah.
in the course of a year, a normal year,
Yes.
what passes for normal
Let's
now,
not talk about it, yes. Yeah.
how many tickets overall to all of the events at the Grand can be expected?
We were
to
on
be
a
sold?
roll right up to the dark days when we had to shutter for 18 months. And up to that point, over 30,000 times, yeah.
Why not consider all of those users of the Grand
Yes,
for their tickets, tacking on a 50-cent
we did.
fee?
We did. We tacked on $1
Okay.
and we increased the cost of concessions. And that's okay.
And that
yes.
went to,
Rising inflation and business costs and cost of doing
but
business.
my point,
Yes,
a separate fee that goes directly to the education fund, so the users, the current users of the Grand,
right.
they can help pay to bring
Oh.
in the new users that are now 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 years old.
Sure. Well, absolutely. And we have folks that give, a gift to the Grand and give grants and funding, especially over COVID. That's why we're still here. Was a main deal. That here's where it gets odd, and you should really take into consideration. If the Grand keeps raising ticket prices, every time you bump it, you exclude. And that's why I love the vacation movies so much. They're only $1, and you'll see whole families with their dollars, and that's the only time I see them. A lot of times, it's just the vacation movies. Every time I bump it, I lose them. Michelle said something earlier about theater goers. Well, I like to believe everyone's a possible theater goer. I don't want to isolate anybody. Well, it's just the opera goers. Well, if we settle on just the opera goers, we'd have about 100, 200 people. We didn't settle. We found funding from 2 donors and offer free tickets to the opera to any student, completely free, because of 2 generous donors. I want everybody to have access. I don't want it to be just them or just them. That's really what's the problem with the arts. If anybody's been to Broadway recently, average tickets, $200 to $300 a ticket. Guess who's going to Broadway? It's not Nick Turner. Nick Turner's not going to Broadway. There's a lot of people not going to Broadway. It's too expensive. So the more you raise it, the more you exclude people. The Grand's, not just mine, but the Grand's mission is to do great programming that makes money, that pays for all the programming, leaves more money to do charitable things, especially making, my dream would be every student in Ellsworth sees everything for free. Opera, music, theater, that would be great. That's my goal. Instead of raising it, I want to make it free to more people. Yes?
I was remembering before the pandemic, you used to show Tuesday night movies, Thursday
Yes.
night movies.
Yes.
And those were also, were they $1 or?
No, they were a reasonable price. They were second run movies.
Yeah.
Frankly, the reason we don't do them anymore is they lost money.
Yeah, okay.
They
How's
lost
that?
money, and now we're really used to seeing everything online. Really used to it. So we backed off of that, again, to be more fiscally responsible, actually. It was nice for a few people, but it was losing money, and I just couldn't rationalize it. Better, we're trying to do things like, we'll always do BAMP, Film Festival, and now we're working on more film festival type things of Maine-made documentaries or things like that. Things you can't get in about 15 video services now. Now it's worse than ever. The same movie's like on 5 of them. I can't compete.
It's just way more fun to go to the
Yeah.
Grand and get popcorn.
It is, but it's not fun to see the red
Yeah.
after that movie. That's what threw me, is when I really looked into it. Those lose money. Vacation movies, things like that, those are the way to go. And Banff. Any Banff fans? Okay.
So, I'm just gonna, because in a minute, we're
Yes,
gonna-
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's fine. I just wanna see if there are any more questions. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Nick.
I had a question, just that it looks like the rec committee is recommending that we fund the educational programs, right? I can see it's on there for $10,000. Am I
No,
missing that?
it's on this, one. And it's not.
It says Grand Education.
Yeah, it's below the other one, it's like 3 below.
It says
all the
Grand
red ones.
Educational Series.
Yeah, it's on there for 10.
Oh, yes, that one is, it's the grant programming
Yep,
that is.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's not on this sheet. On this sheet, Grand Education Programs is
Sheet,
0.
which sheet you looking at, this one?
It's on mine.
Yeah.
It's not
on there.
mine.
Education Series, but this down the bottom is Grand Education Programs. There's 2 different,
Oh,
there's Grand Educational Series, which is 10,000, and there's
I
Grand
see.
Educational Programs. And maybe they're one and the same, I don't know.
that's just Nick trying to,
They really are. Yeah, and then the total on that is like 35 to 40,000, so we're asking a portion of that. Actually more angled towards subsidizing students in the outreach. Really, that's what that will help.
all right.
Any other questions on recreational? Seeing none, we'll move right along to the outside organizations, and the first one on the list is the Chamber of Commerce.
Glenn, actually, the harbor still is under recreation.
Oh, under recreation, I
Yep.
apologize.
I'm pretty sure we do that every year.
Yeah, we do.
It's a tradition.
So, the harbor.
Good evening, councilors. Adam, Ellsworth Harbor Master. You'll see a slight increase, 2.4%. This was mostly due for the power, and there is a slight increase in the docks float repair maintenance.
This was one of the handouts that were in, from today. Mark, there you go.
Any questions?
Thank you.
He's learned.
Adam has learned when there's a pause in the action.
That's very good. I said when it's quiet, you run.
Okay. Having completed the recreation and the harbor, we'll move along to outside agencies, and the Chamber of Commerce is up first. Gretchen
And-
Wilson.
And let me just say, because we have a lot of groups presenting, we will put you on the clock, ask you to speed through it, Gretchen, for
No problem.
3 minutes, but obviously if there are questions and stuff, we'll
I don't even.
give you plenty of time. So.
I do want to thank you all. I am Gretchen Wilson, the Director of the Ellsworth Chamber of Commerce. A big part of what we do is celebrate and promote Ellsworth. Right on the desk there is a good portion of what you guys have funded for the past several years, and that is the Ellsworth, the Maine's Best Regional Guide, which not only do we hand out here in our local chamber office, but that is shipped all across the country. We get probably 500 requests a month for people that are coming here that are mailed out, and about 100 a year are going to people requesting information and wanting to live here. Our new space, which we've been in 1 year, has doubled our walk-in traffic. So we are seeing an enormous amount of people coming in, one, because we have the park passes there now, but also because the center is big, it's easily accessible, and it is a great way for either a business looking to relocate here, members of the community to come in and get the services, as well as the tourists. So it has been a wonderful thing for us, and it also does get out this marketing that we do. One of the other things that you guys have helped support us with is Leadership Hancock County. We are now up to over 140 graduates of that program. It is a 5-month program that brings 16 managers and up-and-coming directors of organizations and companies into a facilitated leadership program where not only do they get that sort of management type education, we are also educating them on the economic sectors in Hancock County. This year we had Peter present, and we did a big piece on daycare. We did one on the fishing and aquaculture industry. We did one on Acadia National Park and the overuse and how we're going to deal with that over the years with the transportation plan. Law, trying to think. Oh, we did a city government piece, which a couple of you presented on that panel. This is an excellent forum for getting younger managers into volunteer positions. We're looking at them looking at board positions now, taking elected positions, sitting on commissions. This is a really important piece of keeping Ellsworth strong. As you all know, it's very difficult to find people to sit on boards, to take an elected position, that sort of thing. This program really does push that. I ask any of you who want some more information on that to do let us know. It's a great and has been a great program for us. And then basically the rest is marketing. Eric was up here. We do a lot of work with the Rec Commission on the holiday events now. We're pretty much getting the marketing pieces, putting the stuff on the radio, getting it out to the community, as well as the Autumn Gold piece in the fall. March Dine Around has also been marketed beyond Ellsworth to bring people here to eat. So big portion of our budget is to do that for our members and also the nonprofits. A big part of what we do for them is that marketing as well, get their information out.
Good.
Any questions? Yes?
Do you have an online version of that?
Yes, we do. And actually, I have to apologize. It is not up currently. We're working on our website, but yes, every year there is an online version of it. It's a flip book. It is currently not up because of some issues where we're trying to redo our website, so.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. Next on the agenda is Friends in Action.
Good evening, I'm John Lindquist, the new executive director. I've been there 7 weeks and really love it. We have increased our request slightly over last year. Most of that has to do with trying to repopulate the senior center. We've successfully reinstituted meals at the center, coffee hours at the center. We've got some classes going. But there's still a lot of recovery to do. There's still a lot of vacant time and space in there. And we need to be able to attract people back. For those that are not familiar with this, we provide transportation services to places like the senior center, but also downtown for shopping, and provide access to medical, the medical community, if you will. Those services are free. Everybody gets, when they ride with us, they ride for free. We do provide socialization opportunities for older citizens of Ellsworth and Greater Hancock. Those include a lot of the things that are going on at the senior center. And we actually provide meals and food to many of the seniors in Ellsworth and the surrounding area. We deliver for several of the food banks. We deliver hot meals from some of the other organizations. And really, that's about it. So we are hit very badly by the increase in fuel costs. You know, our volunteers pay for all their own gas, and we're afraid that pretty soon we're gonna run out of volunteers, because at $5 a gallon, that's a pretty big ask. So we're looking at a program, trying to devise how we can recompense them for some of that cost, not all of it, but for some of it. That's us.
Questions?
Just that it looks like their actual request is 7,500, but on this main page it says 5,000.
Yeah, it's down below on the, it's broken up into two.
Oh, okay, I see. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the Heart of Ellsworth, Cara.
Good evening. My name is Cara Romano. I am the Executive Director of Heart of Ellsworth, and we wish to thank Council for the years past of funding that we've received. For anyone here who doesn't know, we are the downtown organization that works to revitalize all of the downtown area by working with residents and businesses to beautify and attract folks to our downtown district. Councilors, as you've seen in our request this year, we've asked for an increase in our request amount for a total of $5,350. $2,850 is requested for our beautification efforts that have to do with our flowers on the Union River Bridge and throughout the downtown Main Street district, as well as the lighting of the holiday, the lampposts, around the holiday season. We're looking to expand this year by lighting the Franklin Street two municipal parking lots that are down there, right across the street from the Down East Bakery. It's an area of the city that could use more light and definitely more cheer during the holiday season. That's, for anyone else who doesn't know, that's where the electric car charging stations are that the city and Climate to Thrive put in a few years ago. We are also members of, affiliate community members of the Main Downtown Center and the National Main Street Organization. So we're requesting this year that the City of Ellsworth, who holds the affiliate designation from the Main Downtown Center, we pay the dues on it currently, but we're asking this year if the City of Ellsworth would consider splitting the dues with us that we currently pay to keep the city's status with the Main Downtown Center and the National Main Street Association. Small business support, we're requesting $800 to support our Zoom at Noon program, where we connect with city officials, community leaders, and downtown businesses, and any residents who want to join the call to sort of talk about pressing issues, and also to talk about things that are happening in the community. We do those once a month now. During the pandemic, we did them weekly, and they were very, very, very well attended. Our final request is our Meet the Candidates event. We're requesting $1,200 from the city to support this annual event. It's an annual nonpartisan production that aims to provide educational platform for the voting residents of the city of Ellsworth. This year, we're trying to increase the program to offer not only a platform for folks who are running for city council, but also folks who are running for a seat on the school board. The idea of extending this year's program to cover folks who are running for school board has been something that's been requested of us for the past 3 years, and we just have not been able to have the resources to bump the program up by 50% of the program's current offerings. So since Heart of Ellsworth's inception in 2016, we've brought in over $161,000 to the downtown district through grants and other sponsorships that have brought us to sort of where we are today, and into brightening our downtown and making it a really great place. At the time when Heart of Ellsworth came into the downtown district, we were at about 50% capacity, and now downtown is just about full. So we feel that there's been a lot of contributing factors, but we know that Heart of Ellsworth has been a help to that. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
So some of that number was in the rec budget for the beautification, is that right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the numbers.
Yeah, if we look back, I'm pretty sure it was in,
Yeah, I did submit a budget that sort of outlined expenses and materials and out-of-pocket, as well as Heart of Ellsworth's contribution, and then the city support that we're requesting.
Is this a total, like, when we vote on the budget, is this a total vote, or is this line by line, or organization by organization when we do vote?
so we'll talk a little bit more later about that, because I know that's a big question, but essentially, that's up to the council in terms of how we arrive at voting on the budget. The goal will be to try to reach a consensus prior to the June meeting. Otherwise, the June meeting will not end, it will continue. So it will be open to lots of different conversations.
I would like to point out a potential conflict of interest between Casey and voting on this particular topic, because her husband's a board member.
Okay, so we can bring that up at the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Maine lobsterman, it's a new request. Evening.
Evening, and thank you for inviting me to talk. Bear with me, because I just found out about this a few hours ago. But start by telling you who I am. My name is James Dow. I lobster fish out of Bass Harbor. I'm a board member of the Maine Lobstermen's Association. Have been lobstering for almost 35 years. We are here tonight to ask the council for a donation to the Maine Lobstermen's Defense Fund. The Maine Lobstermen are in a extremely important fight to keep the industry going. The National Marine Fisheries has come out with a biological opinion in 2021 with a 60% reduction in 2021 that's being implemented right now. But the complete biological opinion is in 2025, they want another 60% reduction, and in 2030, they want another 87% reduction on top of that, which is a total of 98% reduction in fisheries, which basically puts us out of business. The Maine Lobstermen's Association has sued on this. In DC court, we have the best available team that's very familiar with the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act. They have a lot of experience out of Seattle, Washington, and out of DC. We have scientists on our team, and we have policy people who are very familiar with policy in Washington, DC, to go through all the right departments. This is extremely important to the city of Ellsworth and the surrounding towns, because if Maine lobster fishing goes away, it's going to affect not just lobstermen and sternmen, but banks and trap builders and everyone, restaurants and everything. And there is a serious chance, if this doesn't go well, that lobstering is not going to exist. And definitely what little bit there'll be left will be way different than what it's been for the last 200 years. The heritage of lobster fishing is in danger, and we're hoping that we can get you guys and all the city councils and up and down the whole state to help us and donate to our defense fund. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Questions?
Can you tell me when the last right whale was entangled by lobster gear?
In Maine gear, it's been 20 years since a entanglement has happened in Maine gear. So our lawsuit is based on science and the biological opinion that came out was based on assumptions. So the rope they take off right whales now is what they consider is undetermined. It's a big rope, most of it's Canadian. And we in Maine have been marking our rope for 9 years now. It doesn't have any markings on it. But because Maine is the largest fishery by far of any other fishery in the East Coast, they attribute 50% of it to us. But proven Maine gear, there has not been one proven rope taken off a whale that's been from Maine in 20 years. The one that was taken off, the whale's still alive today. It did not kill a whale. So we also know that the feed for the whale is leaving Maine waters, so they don't see the right whales in Maine anymore. But they don't take this into effect. They're using science from 1970. So we have a great case as far as the science goes, but we just have to go to court to prove it. And that's what we're doing now, and we are looking at raising $10 million. So anything will help.
Councilor Helen?
I'd just like to commend you for asking for a donation at this council's discretion and not setting the rate or the amount. I'm hearing you asking for something, and that is commendable. You're not asking for 5, 10, 20, you're asking for something.
Anything can help.
Could you tell me what other cities have done for you so far? Can you give me any, or is this too new to?
No, we've had cities already donate, and it's a wide range. We've had York, Maine donate $10,000. We've had others as in the $5,000 to $1,000 range, as low as $500.
I'm impressed that you asked for us to determine the amount and that you're asking. Thank you.
Whatever you can do, you take
Commendable.
anything. Any other questions? Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, Down East Community Partners.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Rebecca Palmer, and I am representing Down East Community Partners, where I serve as its executive director. If I were to ask you what does DCP stand for, you may not be able to name it, because it was almost 5 years ago that Down East Community Partners was formed through the marriage of two entities, both of which served here in Ellsworth. So in some ways, we're out of diapers and we're toddlers now, and we're in a position to come to you to ask for your support. In many ways, we are kind of an appendage or augmenting what the city is doing for some of its most vulnerable citizens. And through your general fund, I have my colleague here that will outline some of the data that we've put before you. We come before you humbly to ask for support. And just to recognize the value of what we're bringing. When we approach the other towns, we generally quantify, here's the value, here are the services provided, and we ask for a 10% of that. If we're asking for the 10% here, as you'll hear, it's a really big number. And so we're coming to say, could we partner more specifically with you on behalf of the very high valued services that we're providing? And any amount would be appreciated, following that cue from just before. And we would welcome the ability to represent that together we are serving our most vulnerable citizens here in Ellsworth. I'm inviting my colleague, we're doing a song, I'm the song and she's the dance, to qualify for that, to quantify that for you. And we appreciate your time and your commitment to the citizens, as are we.
Good evening. I echo as well Rebecca Palmer's words. We value, in fact, we highly cherish our relationship with the city of Ellsworth. This is where we are. This is where all of our employees shop. This is where our flowers, when someone sends me flowers for my birthday, it arrives from Ellsworth businesses. And we are very happy to have such a close relationship with Tina House in the General Assistance Fund and with the emergency service people who help us with our toy drive at Christmas time and the backpacks for kids. So if you look at the packet in front of you, the value, this is not including emergency rental assistance. The value of what we provide to Ellsworth is $1,938,267. If I were to add in ERA, our emergency rental assistance for the last fiscal year, that number would increase by about $1 million, meaning that the value that we provide to Ellsworth is over $3 million. So what, as Rebecca has mentioned, we normally say to communities, look, could we get 5% of the value that we offer to your community? If I were to ask you that on just based on the $1,900,000 and some odd $1,000, that would be $96,000. And all of you would just cringe and tell me I'm, Sharon, go back wherever you came from. And what we are asking instead, and again, anything would be appreciated. But what I had submitted to Josh was
Time's running out.
Oh, okay. What I submitted to Josh was for $10,000, which represents 0.5% of the value that we provide to the Ellsworth community. And since we've had no backing for the past decade from Ellsworth, we're hoping that you will unite with us in a manner that we can just feel like we're definitely part of the Ellsworth family. Thank you so much.
Other towns in Hancock County contribute to Downey's Community Partners?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. I happen to live in the town of Hancock. Hancock donated, we just voted actually, to give DCP $11,100, I believe it is.
So where do the dollars go that you're requesting? Like, for example, LIHEAP, things like that are passed through, the rent relief program was passed through. So when you're talking about how much it's the dollar amount, I understand that, but which one of these programs do you take the dollars that are generated by the community and directly pass through to the residents?
That's a fabulous question, thank you. And I'm sorry, my allergies are bad, so I may sound a little like Kermit the Frog. So we offer a lifespan of services from prenatal all the way through to aging in place. A lot of our programs include early childhood education, financial coaching, free tax preparation, business loans to entrepreneurs in the Ellsworth community. If they approach us and say, hey, we want to start a business in Ellsworth, can you help us get started? We do that as well. And in fact, I brought with me, and I can distribute to you, all the different services that we provide. Business loans, childcare, early Head Start, Everybody Eats, family development accounts, financial coaching. Friendship Cottage is the adult daycare service that you may have heard of. The only adult daycare service that did not close down during COVID-19 in the entire state. Free income tax preparation, like I mentioned, and the fuel assistance, Head Start, Helping Hands Garage, which makes cars available at a reasonable rate and a reasonable price to Ellsworth and other members of the Hancock community. Maternal child health, including prenatal for those who are at risk. Transportation, weatherization, home repair. If you have a widower who is barely able to stay in his home because he has a leaking roof, that's our housing department. And that's a lot of what we do. helping people weatherize and make their homes more efficient, so they're not losing the heat that we help them provide, all of those services.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely.
One
Sorry.
last thing. So, as you said, they are a lot of pass-through funds, and just directly go through, we're expecting really a downturn in the support that we've got through government. We're losing a lot of our pass-through funds, and we know that the need through inflation, as we all know, is going to be greater. So we really don't want to have to cut back on any of our services. Thank you.
Any other questions for us? Thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
greatly appreciate being here.
Next up is Down East Transportation. I see no one moving. I'm guessing they don't have representation here, so we'll move right along to Eastern Area Agency on Aging.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dan with Eastern Area Agency on Aging. Yes, it's a mouthful. I've been there for a year, and I still have to slow down and say it. As you can imagine, in the title, Aging, we deal with everything with older adults. We offer several programs through our agency. The most famous one you probably recognize is Meals on Wheels. And right here, last year, for Ellsworth residents, we delivered almost 7,000 meals to Ellsworth residents. We served a total, between all our programs, individuals, 256 different Ellsworth residents. And that's between our Meals on Wheels program, our Furry Friend Food Bank, which provides supplemental pet food for low-income seniors, so they don't have to make the choice between feeding their pets, feeding themselves, and medication. We do a bunch of calls and information, including Medicare counseling. We help Ellsworth residents save over $21,000 and Medicare, between finding the right plans and options and copays for medications. What else we got? We offer wellness programs, so I would love to take any questions. And we did not ask for an increase this year, we asked for the same amount as previous years.
When,
You have caregiver support groups?
Yes, we do. Actually, Hancock County is one of our more popular ones.
I appreciate the drilling down in terms of being able to identify a number of specific residents in the city who are being served by you and under what.
We find that very important for you guys to do it. I'm a selectman in my own town, and I like to see those numbers too when we're talking about supporting agencies.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, Glenn,
Yes.
could you close that window, please?
Next up is Ellsworth Free Medical Clinic.
You want me to shut this off too?
Is that the AC or the heat?
Good evening. I'm Linda Grindle from the Ellsworth Free Medical Clinic. I've been with the clinic since its inception. I was the first nurse they called. And 8 years ago, I took over the management of the clinic. We're located at the Mill Mall. We are for the uninsured, and we had to change it to the underinsured too. People with very high deductibles that just simply, until they meet $5,000 or $6,000 in bills, they're not going to be able to get anything paid for. We've been in business 30 years as of December. We are supported by grants and donations. We've never gotten any government money of any kind. We are 501c3. We now have, well, we started out with one afternoon at Dr. Hayes' office, who was one of the founders, and a lot of you older folks would recognize Dr. Hayes as one of the doctors at the hospital for many years, and had 6 or 7 kids in this town. We now have 2 full-time full doctors, 1 PA, 1 orthopedist, 1 physical therapist, 1 psychiatrist, 1 social worker, and a counselor. It's a combination. Counseling is one of the hardest things to get for uninsured people in the state of Maine. And the hospital gives us, and Dr. Hayes was instrumental in this, free labs, x-rays, and EKGs. The simple kind, nothing very complicated or extensive. We now have 3 dentists who work with our patients. We got a grant for this project, and so we will pay for up to $500 of your dental bills. If you're really in a bind with something serious, we'll extend that. We also have a developmental director who is a phenomenal grant writer, so we're very fortunate in that. We again, the grant supports dentists. We have a social worker grant and a counselor grant that we're working with right now. We have a med assistance program. You apply to the drug company, and usually it's the more expensive drugs, but I can get lots of insulin and stuff. The drug companies, I make out paperwork, you give me your finances, so I know what you make now, which I don't really care. If you qualify, you get free drugs. I've got one drug that's $60,000 a year, and I'm getting it free for one of our patients. We're a primary care practice by appointment. We're not an emergency practice with we get a lot of calls in emergency. We do a lot of referrals. We refer that person either to walk-in care, the ER, or the new medical place on High Street. All our doctors and nurses are volunteer. All these people I mentioned give of their time. The only people paid is the manager and office assistant are the only paid staff. You have to have that for consistency and keeping track of everything. As we know, there's a lot goes on in the doctor's office. We thank you for your previous donations over the years to the clinic. We hope you will fund us again. And if anyone's curious about the clinic, feel free to drop into the Mill Mall, particularly Monday or Tuesday. We're usually closed on Wednesday. So that's the history of the free clinic and what we're asking for. Any questions? And we don't just serve Hancock County. We have people coming from Damascotta, Waterville, Skowhegan, way down east. We're the only free clinic in eastern Maine. There are a few down southern Maine, but none up here. So people are willing to travel because they just can't get medical help.
Do you keep track of the number of patients you carry there?
We usually see about 700 to 800 patients a year. Because
Some of them multiple times, or 700 visits a year?
700 visits, and we are a PCP, your primary care physician is what we want to become. As I said, we're not an emergency clinic. So that makes a difference in, the number of people.
Do you serve, individuals tend to be just over the income level to qualify for main care? Is that dilemma?
No, we start out with you with no insurance, because we can't take anybody with insurance. A lot of our patients, once they go to the hospital or something, they'll get worked up and they will get main care. And then we have to request that you find another doctor. And that's one of the things that our social work is doing now, is locating the other doctors in Hancock County that are taking patients, the amount of time it takes you to get in. So, because they are main care, we're not main care in any way. So they will not, if I called up and said, I got so-and-so here, they won't even talk to me because I'm not registered as a main care facility.
Question, as a PCP, let's say you order some diagnostic tests and the patient has something severe, like a colon cancer or a uterine cancer or something like that, then what do they do?
What we do, we will, if it's real urgent, the doctor would probably call them. We do all kinds of referrals. We refer people out for everything. We refer you to the hospital. You'd go to a surgeon for that would investigate whatever the need is or the emergency is, depending on the severity of how soon that we would, you might get another appointment, or you might get referred, the doctor would call you from home possibly even. I would be calling him that it was critical, and he would then take care of seeing that you got what you need.
Who covers the malpractice for the volunteer doctors?
Maine Medical Mutual, and if there's any doctors in the crowd, you're gonna faint. If you have no regular practice and you're volunteering your time, I can get you medical insurance for $100 a year. And think what the doctors pay at the hospital.
Any comments?
But only if you don't have another job that's covered.
What, pardon?
Only if you're a retired doctor who does not have another practice.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You cannot have a regular practice and get that. And some of our doctors come with their own insurance. One of our doctors, she's the hospice doctor, and she's got a couple other things she does. So she has her own insurance. But if you don't, like our head doctor doesn't, why, we insure you. We can get it from Maine Medical Mutual for $100 a year.
Nice.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next on the list is the EMEA shelter.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Stacy Herrick. I'm the director of the EMEA shelter right here in Ellsworth. Just a little bit about our shelter for those of you that don't know. Pre-COVID, we were a 25-bed facility, and since then we are down to 15 beds approximately, and that's due to having a quarantine room inside of our shelter, as well as being able to space our people out far enough. Last year, we served 75 guests that stayed a total of 3,065 bed nights at the shelter. We moved 19 households into permanent housing. That's 39% to permanent housing. That number may sound very low, but actually it's exceptionally good, especially due to the housing crisis that we're facing right now. At our shelter, we also have a free clothing store that is open to anybody in the community. That's open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We supplied warm clothing and hygiene products to 322 individuals, 73 families. Our emergency food pantry distributed 1,249 food boxes last year, with an additional 115 Thanksgiving food boxes and 107 food boxes for Christmas. And we also provided 232 children with Christmas gifts last year. Approximately 60% of our clients that we serve are from Ellsworth. We continue to grow to meet the needs of our community the best that we can. All that stuff that I just told you was stuff that we do on a normal basis. That doesn't include the many phone calls that we get of people who have nowhere to go and we're full. We are doing this new program now that's diversion, and when people call and we have no place to put them, we have to figure out what we can do to help them. That could be sending people to California to live with their family, which we've done, putting people in motels, helping their family members pay for their own bills so that they can have somebody else living with them. There's a lot with what we do. We're celebrating our 30 years right now. We've been serving the community for 30 years, and so we're very proud of that. Is there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody eats.
My name's Ron King, and I'm a volunteer at Everybody Eats. We're in our 14th year providing a free meal on Mondays, every Monday for the last 14 years. Ever since COVID happened, we have been doing all takeout meals as opposed to eat-in meals. In 2021, we provided 4,573 meals. We are a part of Down East Community Partners, but we receive no funding through them. They do our bookkeeping for us. We've just started another meal on Fridays. We're providing bag lunch of a sandwich and other things. So we hope to go back to in-person meals sometime if we ever get back to something called normal, where we will be doing both takeout and in-person meals. And thank you for the support you've given us in the past. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Families first. Any representations? Let's move on to Hospice of Hancock County.
Hello, I'm Jody Wolford Tucker. I serve as Executive Director of Hospice Volunteers of Hancock County. We were begun 42 years ago as Hospice of Hancock County, and at that time was the only hospice service in the county, but we're an independent, volunteer, state licensed program providing direct services to those who are facing end-of-life journeys, their caregivers, and those who are grieving, as well as community education to come one, come all. As our medical hospice partners came into the county, the distinction needed to be made. And so we added the name volunteer, the word volunteer to our name. So formally, we are Hospice Volunteers of Hancock County. As I mentioned, we work very closely in partnership with the medical hospice providers in the county, and we're proud to do that. It's a good system because they're getting all the medical care they need, and as an independent program, we're able to use our resources to serve in ways that can be creative. I can say more about that if you're interested. In the last fiscal year, we served 74 patients and their families who were in end-of-life journeys, including 12 in the city of Ellsworth. We provided over 700 gestures of bereavement support to those who are grieving, including 10 residents of Ellsworth. And we have a really interesting program where folks give us used equipment like wheelchairs and walkers and even hospital beds, potty chairs, anything like that, and that their loved ones or they don't need anymore, and they're happy to have it go to somebody who can use it. We receive it and give it out free of charge to folks who can use it. And in that program, we served 171 people, 42 of whom were residents of Ellsworth, and that's in the last fiscal year. The third prong, besides patient care, bereavement support, is of our mission core services is community education. And during the pandemic, we have just taken off with that. The use of technology has allowed us to provide, in the last fiscal year, 33 educational programs with an average of about 20 people in attendance. And that's everything from self-care through the pandemic to advanced care planning to be sure a family is ready for the inevitable, to creative funeral planning during the pandemic, which, by the way, is a program that's coming up just this coming Friday at 10 a.m., free of charge on Zoom. If you're interested, please pass the word and join us. We receive support from, last year it was 29 towns in Hancock County, and that aggregate of all of that support from the towns makes up between 7 and 8% of our budget. So we're not asking for any one town to really foot a big part of our bill, but the finances, really help, and what's equally as important is really the partnership that it represents, that the towns really value what we do and the ability to provide these services free of charge to your residents. We have been supported by the city of Ellsworth for several years, and we're very grateful. So thank you for that. I'll be happy to take any questions you have. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Life Flight Foundation?
Hi there. My name is Ashley Macmillan, and I'm the Director of Annual Giving at the Lifelight Foundation. And I will be brief. I will give a very quick overview about Lifelight of Maine. So we are a statewide nonprofit. We have a public mission. We serve all of Maine 24/7, 365. When I say statewide, we have 3 bases throughout the state. We have a base in Sanford, we have a base in Lewiston, and we have a base in Bangor. And all 3 of those bases has a helicopter. The Bangor base also has a fixed-wing airplane, and then also some ground ambulances. So each Lifelight crew is made up of a paramedic, a critical care nurse, and a pilot. We were founded in 1998, and since then we have transported about 33,000 patients in Maine, 2,300 of those in the past year. And of that, 367 have been town of Ellsworth residents, and we transported 42 Ellsworth residents just in the past year. So we are quite literally a flying ICU, so we bring the critical care to the patient where and whenever they need it. We land on trails, we have 150 remote landing zones across Maine. We're also transporting patients from their local community hospitals to those bigger hospitals in southern Maine, sometimes outside of Maine, wherever they need it. We are requesting $1,935, and that is per the 2010 census, that's about 25 cents per capita. We do have a town funding campaign. Every fall, we reach out to all the municipalities in Maine and ask for their support. We do transport patients from every town, and we hope that each town can chip in. So that's just a little bit, but I'll answer any questions.
What's the average reimbursement for a life flight from Ellsworth to Bangalore?
I don't know the exact amount from Ellsworth, but our average cost per flight is about $19,500. We're similar to a hospital where we'll participate with the insurance, so we'll submit for reimbursement. But just comparatively, so like Boston MedFlight and other air medical services in northern New England, their average is about $27,000 per flight, and then nationally it's about $60,000. So we are quite lean. And just take care of all of Maine.
What percentage of flights are uninsured?
Oh, that's a good question. I do not know that. We don't check insurance before they make a flight. It's an emergency, it goes. So I'm actually not entirely sure of what percent is uninsured.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Loaves and Fishes.
Good evening. I'm Andy Matthews. I'm the board president of Loaves and Fishes Food Pantry. And we have been receiving funding from Ellsworth for, I don't know how long, a really long time. And we want to thank you for that. We have been serving the food insecure in Hancock County for more than 42 years. We've done that pretty quietly. Lately, we're a lot louder about what we're doing, and I'll talk about that for just a minute. But if you look at the numbers, in 2021, we had 2,850 family visits. Families were eligible to come once a month. So we served 2,850 families. Now, some of those were duplicates. Of that 2,850 family visits, 1,275 were from Ellsworth residents. And it was 246 unique families that came multiple times. Already this year, we're at 220 families from Ellsworth. Since January, we have had 231 families come to the pantry for the first time, ever. They've been added to our rolls, and those are from all throughout Hancock County, and we serve beyond Hancock County as well. The money that we are requesting will go directly to food, people food, pet food, and personal hygiene items. It doesn't go to any other of our costs. And I want to make it clear, a lot of you have heard a lot about us lately, and you've seen our brochures. We have purchased a new building. We won't be in our 1,200 square foot little tiny building. Hopefully by the end of September, we'll be moving to our new building, which is 8,000 square feet. And we'll be expanding our services where families will be able to access food anytime they need it. We'll be their grocery store. Our services are available to all residents. We don't ask for proof of income or anything like that. There's no charge for any of our services. At the new facility, we're going to be offering more of a community-based program. We have a community garden that has just gotten installed, and the soil got in the beds the other day. And that'll be open to the broad community. Anybody who wants to utilize any portion of the garden will be able to do that. We have a community engagement center where we'll be offering additional services, interface with other agencies to sign up for things, classes, SNAP education classes. I've had a couple of banks want to do some financial health classes, those kinds of things. And we'll have a teaching kitchen where we'll be teaching different types of cooking classes, say food preparation and storage, canning classes, those kinds of things. But none of what we're asking for is going toward that building campaign that you're hearing a lot about. That's a completely separate thing. The $5,000 that we've requested is simply to support food. Our costs are going up just like everybody else's costs. Any family that comes to the pantry leaves with a retail value of about $400 worth of food on every visit. So the money we're asking for pays for about 12 visits out of the 1,275 visits. We do appreciate the support. We're completely donation funded. We don't receive any other government funds in any way. So grants and individual donations. Any questions?
Where's your community garden?
It's right out in front of the new building. So the new building's at 137 Down East Highway, the old Granville Rentals building. And at the top of that wall used to be a parking lot. Now it's got 8 raised beds, about 5,000 square feet. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Northern Light Home Care and Hospice.
Hello, I'm Erin Kearns. I manage the local hospice team here in Hancock County for Northern Light Home Care and Hospice. Our organization does home care. We do palliative care consultations in home, as well as provide hospice care. We thank you for your support in the past. And I want to present what we've done in the FY21 for patient care in Ellsworth directly. We served 168 patients in Ellsworth. That was over 2,875 visits. And so our team consists of, so that could be nursing, social work. You heard someone speak, a hospice doctor. So our hospice doctor also works at a free clinic, so she might make a home visit if needed for a hospice patient. So any of the monies that we raise through towns or cities or through other fundraising would go toward care that is not reimbursed by medical insurances, because we are the medical hospice agency, medical home care. So it would go toward other items that might be equipment that people can't afford to buy that might help improve their health. It's been really nice to sit here and listen to all of these organizations that are social workers. So often try and make referrals to, and just to really hear about how our community all works together. I hear the names of these organizations throughout my days, and trying to connect our patients to all the services that they need. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. WIC, representative, women and children. Seeing none. Ellsworth Snowmobile Club? Sure. Is there anyone here from the Snowmobile Club? Nope. So Garden Club, you're up.
Thank you. My name is Monica Moeller. I am the current president of the Ellsworth Garden Club. I want to start actually by thanking the city for the permit that allowed us to close off a portion of Birch Avenue and hold our plant sale this past Saturday, which was quite successful. And that sale helps fund our club, but we ask every year, as I've been president for 4 years, for this $7,000. We've received it in the past, and we really appreciate it. We not only use it for the public gardens that we maintain, such as Donald Little Park, the Blue Star Marker, the pollinator garden at St. Dunstan's, the planting bed at Harbor Park, which we just worked on Thursday. In addition to our new projects like the tree nursery at Jordan Homestead, last fall we put 8 really beautiful red maples along High Street in that area that's somebody called the triangle, but it never really looks like a triangle to me. And then we have been doing work here around City Hall, and we're going to start working actively on the Riverwalk behind the library. The other thing that your dollars do for us is it allows us to apply for grants, and we receive actually a good deal more money. For the past couple of years, we've gotten money from Project Canopy. By the way, I don't know if you're aware, but did you know that Ellsworth just got awarded Tree City status? And that's partly because of the work that we've been doing with the tree nursery and the tree planting focus. And then we've got money from the Maine Community Foundation also. And so we say to these organizations, give us money for this special project, and oh, by the way, Ellsworth supports us. So that's basically what I have. It's all pretty much in the document. Happy to answer any questions.
Where is Hosta Alley?
Oh, Hosta Alley, I just went by it, it looks great. Next to where Ruth Foster had her building, it's an alley that goes through the parking lot off of Main Street.
I'll have to look for it. It's not
Right, it's now white. Take a walk down there. It's really just an alleyway, and now is lined on both sides with some really lovely hosta.
I can see that they're on this list.
Yeah, that's,
What's that?
They're not on the list.
Yeah, that's because it's under Parks, Trees, and Cemetery section of the Public Works Department, section 11.
Say that again.
I have no explanation.
one person. Or 2. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our list. Is there anyone whose organization has representation here that we did not call? Seeing none? Would you like to take a quick break before we get into the capital stuff? Or do you wanna keep-
Take a quick break or not? No?
Okay.
You want to take a break? Whatever?
All right.
Keep going.
All right,
We'll leave it up to individuals can get up if they need to.
All right, so moving right along, we'll get into capital, which is section 15. Oh my.
I'm gonna leave you guys some broken woods and religious broken woods on the tree climbing. This mug shots of everything that works there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm also leaving some handouts from you all.
Thank you.
Somebody reach over and grab that.
Thank you for your
Yeah.
service. I'm the widow of Rebecca. Oh, are you really? Yeah, you just don't have the hat on that makes it so obvious.
Thank you.
Can somebody reach those?
That's right. That's right.
I just figured since you're on the
That's
end,
fine.
it'd be easier. All right, fine, I'm gonna go pee.
You just got busted.
All right, we're taking a break.
Taking a quick break.
Thank you. Nobody wanted it, but
Everybody said
everybody
no.
does it, yeah.
If there's any left over, I'd like to be able to give some
Well,
to my
I'll
patients.
drive fast.
Because it's a valuable resource for them.
Answer this spam call, let them know. Thank you. I think we're all set. One, two. Yep, we're all set.
All right, so moving right along to capital improvement requests. So what you're gonna have a whole lot of requests, and what you'll see with the cover sheet is you've got two sides. One side is all of the requests that were submitted by the separate department heads, and then on the right-hand column are the manager's recommendations as to what projects should be priorities for your consideration. And then That's with the exception of the enterprise accounts. The enterprise accounts, since they don't come out of general taxation, all of those capital requests for those departments are brought forward for your consideration.
So can I raise, this is a question for the council. There's a couple of ways. I'm assuming that the plan was that department heads were going to come up and talk about what they've submitted in total. And I guess I would ask that maybe we streamline that a bit, that certainly if we have questions about an area, we could do that. But if you've, as the manager, vetted this through and are proposing a plan based on deeper knowledge, maybe that's where we should start. And if there's something specific to add in, then we can have that discussion as opposed to trying to tease it all out. And because I'm assuming you've had numerous conversations on this matter.
Yeah, I would say that to the extent that department heads wish to, there's certainly disagreement, if you will, as to what I necessarily have identified as a priority as opposed to the individual department heads. So, there is some discrepancy on that aspect. So, individual department heads, may wish to discuss, additional capital projects that I haven't brought forward. So, and I would think we would afford them the opportunity for their best sales pitch. And there may be some instances where that's not necessary. So.
All right.
I think probably, since it's short, if the library wants to approach. So the library, the capital that was requested by Amy before she left, the two projects for this fiscal year, one was the fence and retaining wall project, which was actually funded last year, but the work was not done. And it's estimated that the cost is going to be considerably more than the original $15,000 that last year was budgeted. To my knowledge, we haven't seen an updated estimate on that work. If someone from the library knows anything different.
Good evening. Well, as you know, I'm not the department head. Unfortunately, we do not have a department head. Amy is no longer with us. But I'll try to speak as best I can in the interim. Charlene Clemens, who has nobly stepped up yet again to cover and take over for interim director, is with us as well. Basically, I've talked to our long-term facilities manager, custodian, Edmund Murray, who's very good. And addressing your first point, as far as the retaining wall, I have less information on that. I understand that we are looking at additional estimates. The additional estimates that we have will be higher, but I'm not sure exactly what they are, to be honest, at this point. We've put out requests for that. With the amount of building that's going on in the area, with the amount of construction overall, it's a little bit more challenging for us to get individuals to come on board and to review and discuss it with us, but that's a work in progress. I know that the engineer that reviewed it commented on some significant safety issues. Apparently I'm not sure how many of you may be familiar, some of you are. In the library, in the rear parking area, there's a parking area that's a large stone embankment, which is kind of buttressed by a large, very tall stone wall that wraps around the parking area. Apparently that is needing some serious work. There's a concern that if it was to start disintegrating in some way, it could present a safety hazard. So the engineer that reviewed it did suggest we deal with it as soon as possible, if possible, the entire project, if not all of it. There apparently is a way of sealing part of the wall transitionally and dealing with the fencing, which is the fencing that's on the other side of the parking lot overlooking the Union River, which is, I think, probably 35 to 40 years old at this point. So that's that part of the dynamic.
The other request that was made by Amy, again, prior to her leaving the city employment, was a roofing project. I did not bring that capital request forward. The estimate was, I believe, $48,000 for roofing project in the library. And part of the reason why I did not bring that particular capital forward is A bigger conversation to have with the library. The library has a $50,000 grant fund through the King Foundation that was originally granted for a project within the library, some sort of remodeling, which hasn't been done. And so I was interested in pursuing to see if those grant funds could be applied towards this roofing project. And so that was a conversation that needed to be had with the library. And so that's part of the reason why that one was not brought forward on my list.
Could we just ask if Amy was aware of that? Because the Board of Trustees, this is the first we've heard of this.
No, she was not. She left the employment of the city before the priority list was put together for capital.
The roofing project, and this is something that the trustees are grappling with now, we were aware of it now. The challenge with the roof, the new addition, I put that in quotes because the new addition was 1990. The new addition and the bridging area between the older Tisdale house and the new addition, that roofing, when it was inspected, we have 2 quotes. We're waiting for a third. The third has not responded. Again, it's, I think, in part just because it's such an active area and there's so many people working on so much. There was not architectural shingling, as I understand, talking with Edmund, our facilities custodian. He's concerned about 3 things. One, it is a 30-year-old roof. There are sections of it that look like they're degrading fairly significantly. We don't have water intrusion yet into the new addition, again, new in quotes. But the concern he has, and it was shared by a number of the roofers, the 2 roofers that did do evaluations on the building, is that in the next 6 months to a year, it would have to be addressed. Because our concern is that if water intrusion starts working down into the building itself structurally, the long-term cost could be much higher than the roof itself. Glenn, I think, and I have the quotes in my briefcase that we got that have to be updated a bit. The updated quote, I thought, was a bit less than that. I don't believe it was 40,000, but I could be wrong. But I'll certainly get that information. I think it was somewhere in the area of 28 to 32. That includes both the new addition and the bridging area, and some work that needs to be done on guttering and sheathing around the where the buildings connect. But it's something we are obviously going to have to tackle one way or the other.
48 is what?
48 is what you have, okay. That's something I'll have to, Charlene and I will look at that and see if we can narrow that down.
And just to clarify it, so there was conversation with Amy prior to her departure regarding that those $50,000 in grant funding and the potential to reappropriate those for other needs that the library has outside of the remodeling.
They were quite specific as to how that money could be used. That's something, and hearing this for the first time tonight, that's something as trustees, we're gonna have to review the document and the grant, because we were unaware of that conversation. And we haven't looked at that grant for quite some time, but it was rather specific in its use.
Yeah, well, again, the finance director and I both had conversations when the request was made for us to transfer those funds into a CD.
Yes, there's a CD that's been standing for some months.
There was conversation at that time, since there is no immediate plan to utilize those funds for their original intent, if those funds could be applied to other needs that the library has.
And I think part of the reason for this part of the discussion is that when we last revisited about a year ago the King grant, it was very specific. It was not specific necessarily to what we used it for, as long as it was something renovational or expanding, something not involved with maintenance. So one of the challenges we may have, and the reason we created the CD, is simply we had to park the funds appropriately. In other words, we can't utilize them, we can't until we utilize them for what they're intended for or something analogous. And so we didn't want them simply to sit with nothing, but we didn't want to risk anything with them either in terms of anything other than a CD. That's the reason for the CD. But We will have to revisit, obviously, the King request. I know that Amy was in contact with the person that was the coordinator at the time for that particular segment. That's a very large foundation, and they do many things, of which this is apparently not a large contribution. But again, the roof is, when we prioritized what we needed to have done over the next 2 or 3 years, the roof and the retaining wall, those two, were the ones that we felt were the most significant and the most needed.
Councilor O'Hell.
So, thank you.
I have a question for you, sir.
Sorry, didn't mean to.
That's fine, that's fine.
Fire away.
This is the second time I've heard partial roof repair. During the school budget presentation, they talked about sectionally repairing a roof. And my question is this: the roof repair of the addition from 1990 is 32 years old. What's the age of the shingles on the rest of the building?
Well,
Do we have
that's a great question. I think I can answer it. The Tillsdale house, the original building, was recently re-roofed. So that's been done. That was the first part. That was in more serious need of addressing. The cupola that looks so architecturally grand on the top, Amy would experience situations where she'd be sitting at her desk and water would start dripping onto paperwork. So that's been taken care of.
What's recent?
Oh, that was done last year.
Okay. Okay.
The original edition, the reason I think I like that question in part because I was told that the original edition, we're not sure, and Edmund is not sure, whether they used ice and water shield on the entire roofing, which would give us a bit more protection, or whether they used just the first 6 feet, which was the norm at the time. And if that's the case, the other concern that the roofers had was the structural integrity of the plywood sheathing underneath the shingling. Because he's noticed over time some significant degradation in the flashing and the area around the upper part of the rim of the new addition. And if you think of look at well, you can't there, but now you can in a sense, the large palladial windows that are in the new addition, when you are in the library and look up, the ceiling is quite high. It's a beautiful interior, but it's very hard to get at in terms of getting a sense of things. So when things started to go south, they would go south fairly quickly, which is the reason we're concerned.
So if I understand you correctly, if this was to be approved, 48, 50,000, somewhere in that ballpark, you would have a complete new roof on the
Yes.
entire structure,
Yes.
correct?
Yes. The reason for this at this point is it would do two things. It would ensure the integrity of the core building completely. The new building has been done. The Tillsdale building was done. It would also ensure that we could, to some extent, reprioritize and deal with other projects that are serious, but not as serious, in terms of looking forward with funds, depending on what we have over time. Because I should say, one of the challenges we're dealing with is, you recall that the budget we presented that we are not requesting a fund for books. I mean, books were taken out of the fund. We're going to be dealing with some of our supplementary funds to deal with purchasing books for this year while we work through where we are with things. So yes, that would be correct. If we are able to do this year, and the other concern we have is the longer we put this off, I mean, it is a historic centerpiece for the community. The longer we put it off, the more expensive it's going to be. There's already been a significant increase from when we first had it evaluated some years ago. And again, Glenn, the trustees will look at that in terms of the estimate to get a better sense of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we move on, a couple of quick questions. So some of all of the capital items, the approving of them, we don't have a bond. This is talking about we would fully fund it through taxation.
Yes, in this budget.
In this budget. So which is different than in other years where we've had a bond to appropriate some of those activities.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
So that was the library facilities, just real quickly, because Steve Joyle's not here. He had 2 requests, City Hall exterior renovation engineering, and City Hall exterior renovation engineering. The first one, the engineering, if you remember, a couple of years ago, there was an envelope study done of this building. Nothing was done, I think it was 2017 that the original study was done. So we contacted the company to come back and basically freshen up the study. And that's what I brought forward with the 19.5. And then once we have a fresh, new version of the study, then we'll have some idea of what next steps are. And this building has significant, just for a historical perspective, the last estimate when that study was done was about 1.5 million worth of repairs. We have the cupola, which leaks extensively, and actually Maine Municipal has recently contacted us, unhappy that nothing's been done about the leaking of the cupola up on the roof, because of the danger that it extends to the rest of the building, plus the work hazard for the employees who go up and dump buckets from the contraption that has been made up there to gather the water. And the water damage throughout the interior of the building is extensive, and also extensive mold and other water issues down in the fire department that all need to be addressed with the building envelope study.
Councilor Howland.
How much was the original study? If this is a fresher for 20 grand, how much was spent on the original one and nothing done?
I don't have the answer. I can get you it was done long before I was the manager, but it's been at least 4 years since the study was done, so.
Would you guess it was 100 grand? Is this 20% of that number, or you have no idea?
No. It was.
No, it was, I can't remember. It was probably in this ballpark, if I remember, somewhere.
Okay.
But I guess, obviously you were in the role, but since you are in the role, I'm going to direct it your way. And this is kind of an overall statement. At one point, this was one of my personal pet peeves in terms of not having a capital plan, and attempted to try to form a group to start looking at that, and then COVID hit and kind of derailed some of that momentum. But I think that's, for me, that's one of the major, and I think you've been working towards some of this, tasks that the city has, is to really look and understand what is needed long-term, and to have a plan so that when the council is appropriating funds, that the funds are being appropriated to deal with the larger plan, and that progress is made. And too often, I have seen the council appropriate dollars for something and nothing happened with it. Either the funds go unspent, the project doesn't happen, and there's just no movement forward. And that's not criticism on the part of any individuals. It's just the reality of how things have played out. And I think the reason for that is we don't have this master plan for X. So this building, what is our long-term strategy? It's going to be very expensive to address the issues that need to be addressed. Are we going to do it? And if we are, what's the plan? How many years is it going to take? What do we expect? Having some vision for that. And then Project B, what does that look like? How many years? And I think that's helpful for some continuity from council to council to council when there's an understanding. That doesn't mean that every council is going to continue, because other priorities can come up. But when we don't have that overall vision and that overall plan, it just feels choppy, and then we leave a lot of money unspent, projects don't get addressed, and we end up in a situation where things just get worse and not better. So I just say that in terms of, that's just one of the things that I think we need to do a better job of as a city.
Yeah, so just to kind of respond to that, my hope with this envelope study is that we can prioritize projects within the study, and instead of eating the entire apple all in one bite, take little bites from the apple and start to make the necessary repairs without necessarily doing the entire thing all at once. And the study does set priorities. It does give you priorities as to what should be the first thing to tackle. Obviously, the cupola is probably still, I suspect it's still going to be the #1 issue with the building, because a lot of the water that's coming in is a result of that particular function of the city, of this building, so.
Councilor Haynes?
So, sorry, the 19,500, that's for the envelope study. And then whatever it is that says we need to do, you expect that to be more than $100,000?
Yeah, the 100,000 is just for engineering, so they take the study, all the issues they identify from the study, and then they engineer how to fix those problems. I'm not saying that that's the direction that I think we should go in. I think once we get the study, we can break down the individual projects as, you know, by priority, and then we can tackle each individual project as opposed to tackling the entire thing, which will require the $100,000 worth of engineering to figure out, okay, how do we fix every problem from A to Z? Well, I'm more interested in just fixing the most important, the most, you know, dramatic issue first, and then we can, you know, get to the other things eventually as we get to them.
Councilor O'Halloran?
If this study was done in 2017,
Mhm.
and I'm assuming from everything that I have heard that the cupola is the #1 project.
Mhm.
Does anyone know what it costs to fix the cupola? Because this second study is going to say the same thing, isn't it?
Regarding the cupola, it is, and we don't have any specific estimates on repairs of the cupola because there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can replace it entirely. From my review of the original study, envelope study, they didn't feel like they weren't sure exactly how you would go about repairing the cupola that's up there. So there was talk about, you know, how do you replace it? Obviously, you have to replace it because of the historic nature of the building. So do you do that with essentially just a fictitious cupola that doesn't have the capacity to walk up in it like the one that we currently have? Do you do that with some 3D printer? I mean, there are different options out there, which would all need to be explored. But I think more importantly, or the reason for this study is, in my review of the study, there were some areas that were missed in the original study. There weren't specific things addressing the issues in the fire department and the water issues in the fire department. And then since that study was done, we have repaired one roof over the the HR office that was leaking. So we have made progress on that level, but there are other areas of the building that have deteriorated since then, including continued issues with the steps out front here. That's another portion of that study that was done. So. But I'll review the study, but I don't think in that study, I don't recall any dollar figures being attached to any of the recommendations.
I just have to say that I'm not a fan of studies getting parked on shelves and then paying for another one. I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, I agree. And that's my point, is that happens too often. And I think, and I say this, my son's a new engineer, not in this area, so I appreciate the fact that we need engineering on that basis. But I also think that's the problem, is that we keep having engineering requests and studies and designs, and then they do get parked. That's been kind of a pattern. And for, again, a lot of reasons behind that. It's not a criticism of, because it's hard to go back to say, okay, what derailed a certain project? But going forward, we should have more control of that. And I think thinking through, and to your point, if the cupola is the main priority, then perhaps that's where we start. And maybe that's where we put in resources. We say, okay, we already have that. We know that needs to be done. Let's have that, the plans drafted and fund that, as opposed to kind of starting over, putting more money into something, and then having other parts of the plan sitting. It's got to be done in a way that we don't end up having to redo things and spending money over and over.
Yeah, I mean, we can work from the original study, and we can work from the original study and prioritize from that study. There are going to be additional needs that weren't identified in that study in 2017. That was the purpose for having a freshen up of the original study.
I respect what you're saying. I just, if we got a study on the shelf that says it needs to be fixed, and that's #1, nothing's been fixed since that study, right?
with the exception of the one roof over the HR.
Right, I mean, but nothing to do with this cupola or what have you. So I would think that there's a punch list already in establishment versus spending another 20 grand for a study. That's just an opinion. Maybe a wrong opinion, but it's an opinion.
Very good.
And perhaps, and this may be a harder question, this will be for all of the capital items, is trying to figure out, especially since they're not coming out of a bond that we can, utilize over time. If it's going to be out of the tax base, then getting a sense of, is it something that can be completed this fiscal year or not? Or because if it can't, then I don't think we should be taxing the residents for that and then having encumbered funds and moving it forward. So trying to get a sense to the best of our ability. If we know that it's going to be something that just by the bidding process isn't going to happen, then we should probably delay that and talk about it into the next fiscal year. But that will be a question that I have for all of these items.
Technology, is Jason, I don't know if Jason's.
He's listening.
He'll be here.
3, 2, 1.
Insert Jeopardy music here.
Here he comes. So, technology had 2 requests, desktop computer replacements for $25,000 and server hardware upgrades. And what I've brought forward for priority is the desktop computer replacement. Casey.
We're behind on the desktop computer replacements because of supply chain issues. So that's very important that we try and get back on track with that this year, which is a part of my request. I would argue that we also need the server hardware capital improvement because our firewalls are overdue for replacement currently, and that would be what that would help fund. So those are my 2 requests. The desktop replacement is an annual request, that we try to replace about 1/5 of our computers every 5 years, but we're about 3 years behind currently, so.
So you can correct me as I go astray, but, or when I lose track of what makes sense, but are you all server-based in terms of the desktops tied into a server, and can you migrate to thin clients?
Yes.
Which would be less expensive?
Yes, we've been looking at doing that, and there's a chance that we'll do that in this cycle. With this, now that we're so far behind, it's a good opportunity to potentially migrate to the thin client model, particularly with our computers that are on the front counters, things like that are basic function type machines. So yes, that is something we're looking very closely at doing. Yeah.
Councilor Fallon.
Of this $40,000 request, does anything support or enhance or help the $155,000 programming that we spent?
No.
No,
Casella,
this is-
financial update, no.
It wouldn't make a difference?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Blanchett.
In 30 seconds or less, thin client, educate, please.
All right, see, now you're pushing my way to describe it.
Never
So-
mind.
You were just trying
I
to
can ask
sound
him.
smart.
No, it's basically a unit that doesn't store data. It just runs, it processes and connects to the server. Is that close?
All the processing is done on the server side, and the client is basically like a window to the server, so to speak. It also works really well when you're talking to people working remotely, because they can connect from home and they don't need to have their whole file brought to their home computer or whatever. They're actually manipulating it on the city side, on the server side. So there's a lot of benefits to going that way.
And how many desktops do you get for 25 grand nowadays?
Yeah, not as many as you used to. That's probably 20.
But the thin clients would be
You get a lot more thin clients, yes.
would be half of the
Yeah.
cost roughly.
But would you need to have the server upgrade in order to do the thin client? Or you can do it on the server you have now?
We can do that on the servers we have now, yeah. Which will be being replaced in the next budget year.
Is there any reason not to do the thin?
There's really not.
Client?
They're really there's a lot of advantages more than negatives. They're not for everyone, they won't work for every job role, but for vast majority, they work very well, yeah.
I looked it up before the meeting. Council Caplan?
No, I was asking how many computers, so.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We probably will need to do about 40 computers this year, but we have some funds left already in the CIP, so that'll carry forward, so.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you, Jason. Thank you. Transfer stations, Lisa, Harbor.
I do Harbor, because Rennick's still here.
Yep, we can do Harbor.
Go ahead.
So Harbor had 2 requests, and I brought both, I didn't bring either request forward, but I left both of them on the sheet here for parking improvements for $15,000 and repair cribbing for $85,000.
Good evening. So the crib works, the reason why that was on there, and it's been on there, to your thing, is the crib works, the rocks, as the tides come and we've had them dredged, are slowly settling down. And if we don't cap them, it really, they're not as structurally sound for the ice or people bumping against them with the big boats. The harbor parking lot, it's just in poor shape.
That's the back parking lot.
Oh, okay. You want to talk about that? Good.
Yeah, I'm Mark from the Harbor Commission. We've got a couple of plans that have been in front of you for several years as part of our long-range plan. We update it about every other year. The parking lot is a really inefficient way for us to deal with the amount of volume of boats on trailers, trucks, and people down there for events. So we have come up with ways to better utilize that gravel area that's up more towards Water Street. But we can't just like draw lines in the sand and say, here, park here. There's some repairs that have to be done. Other part of that is the walkway that goes across the front of the existing parking lot along the break wall, along the rocks that go down to the water.
That's part of the local roads budget.
Thank you. The other thing that was not listed is the dredging project. We've been back and forth now with Army Corps. Glenn, you've got an update in the last month and a half? I haven't, that's why I'm asking.
Well, just that Susan Collins' office is bringing the project forward. So,
Yeah.
but we won't know until late summer if it makes the cut, and then according to Jared Golden's office, when we met with him, it'll be
February, March.
Yeah, early next year before we know whether the funds are actually appropriated.
Yeah, and just so that the rest of the council understands, part of what's happening out there, we've dredged that now twice. The Army Corps works with us. It's really their project, it's their channel, but it's a choke point for the harbor and the traffic that comes into the city. What happens is they box dredge it, which means they go into that silt that's out there, kind of straight down, flat bottom. The spring currents are really what does us in. It causes a lot of that stuff that moves down through the river normally to erode that basin back out, and it fills back in. Out around number 4, there's a nun out there that's called number 4. That is at mean low tide, you can walk out through the mud, right through the federal channel. What that does is that chokes off a lot of the commercial guys, the bigger vessels that come in to use our fuel, use our pump stations. The commercial guys, you can't move 2 hours either side of low tide on mean low tides. That dredging project is critical to make sure that we get that done. And by not having anything in the budget, I'm concerned with, we get a call from Carol up at Susan's office, says, hey, guys, we got this approved. It's a fast project. We got nothing. Where do we go to get some money? Unless we earmark some things whether it comes out this year or next year, it has to happen or the harbor's gonna be pretty well emptied out. So we've got an awful lot of energy, a lot of people have done an awful lot of work. And that harbor is filled with equipment, materials that you guys have provided for the citizens of Ellsworth, that if that dredge doesn't happen, we're dead in the water. So it's really kind of an important thing to plan and make sure we don't miss that opportunity again. So I would encourage you to at least consider that, the dredge project, the parking lot. We've had an increase in use of the harbor, Harbor Park, all of those waterfront facilities. There are times when we don't have enough space to accommodate people who come down for lunch. That's a great problem to have. People use the harbor, Harbor Park, but we gotta be able to organize things so people can get in, get out. We have trucks with trailers, boats coming and going, families that come down. We gotta be better prepared than what we are. That's my spiel. Questions?
I just don't know what cribbing is, what
Chris,
that is.
you know those are iconic things that hold the main float up down in the harbor? Those are cribs.
Oh. Yep.
Filled with rocks.
Yep. We did a survey back to what you were talking about before, part of our master plan. We did the survey that said that the cribs are in okay shape except for the rocks. Below the water line, they're in pretty good shape. Above the water line, they're starting to get punky. How long will that last? I don't have a clue. You know, we did that survey, I think we actually had it surveyed. There we go, 9 years ago. You know, what kind of shape are they in now? Visually, they look like they're roughly the same, but eventually they won't be. Steve, you had a question?
Yes. The parking lot improvements for 15,000, this is the gravel parking lot you're talking about in front of the vending area,
Correct.
if you will. What are you doing for 15,000? That doesn't buy much.
It doesn't need an awful lot. It needs, Adam can speak to this a little bit better than I.
Yep.
But essentially what we're talking about is fill, leveling, and repositioning some of the things along the edge.
So we'll have to move the Mike's Harborside Takeout Shack down front as part of that plan. And so we'll have to run new conduit for the electrical, water and sewer, regrading it, re-landscaping it. You know, there's no hot top, maybe stone dust and some red heads to mark where the parking lines would be.
And the other question that isn't on here that I hear about this dredging, you have no idea what that costs, right? Because you have no idea what the feds
We've been down this road so many times, Steve. I think that it's a moving target. That's a pretty rapidly moving target. Just to mobilize the equipment to come up here is $100,000. And they haven't scooped out any old sawdust.
Most of that will be federal funds.
Yeah, what they've talked about, Glenn, you were part of that conversation with Carol Woodcock.
Yeah, so what they're estimating is the 5 million that the earmark is will cover the majority of it with a small match for the city for the
CAD cell.
And the CAD cell, in its simplest form, is a hole where they're gonna put the contaminated soil in and cover it back up. And we have to pay, I believe it's, the match was 10%?
Yeah, the estimate, last estimate we had was just under 300,000.
Okay, all right. And I'm hearing from you that you would have liked to have had this on that list. Is that what I'm
Well,
hearing?
I haven't had this conversation with Glenn, so
Right.
I don't want to jump the
Right.
fence here. I just want to make sure that we're as prepared as we can be when that does happen, whether it's this next year or the year after. We know it's coming because we're on that short list. Army Corps has said, yeah, we got a problem. You know, now the Congressional Funding Office has said, yeah, we need to take care of this.
So would you rather have 85,000 earmarked to that as opposed to this cribbing work? Or do you think the cribbing work is?
They're both important, but as a matter of priority, the dredge has got to be, we have to take care of the dredge. What's going to happen if we don't do a little bit of maintenance on those cribs, when they start to collapse, there's no recovery. And They're a fairly iconic piece in the harbor.
Gotcha.
Can they be replaced with iron? Yeah, probably. But it looks very, very different, and it works very differently.
And if those cribs go and the docks go, then all of the electrical structures and the services for the rest of the docks go. And then if there's boats in the water, is there a liability to the city if boats are lost due to that?
So the cribs aren't to the point of failure. The last time Proc was up, when we had the damage from the ice, they put 4 new pilings in the ground and bolted them to the crib work. Sure, if something ever happened and they broke, it would be the city's liability, but I don't see them going anywhere. They're not to that point yet.
It's not like it's gonna happen all at once. We're gonna have some warnings that, you know, things are falling apart. But we gotta be prepared. That's Dale's excuse for it. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Since Lisa's gonna dominate a lot of it, we'll go and have the remainder of fire. And so fire had 4 items listed: EMS, ELS equipment for $50,000, heat pump for officers' quarters at $15,000, vehicle computer CAD for $13,000, and a multi-use vehicle for $175,000. I brought forward the heat pump for the officers' quarters, vehicle CAD equipment. I did not bring the multi-use vehicle because there's currently $175,000 in the bond, which could be reallocated for that purpose. It was originally allocated last year in the bond for an ambulance, which has not been purchased. So I did not bring that item forward because of that. And the EMS, ELS equipment I did not bring forward as a priority.
So as far as the heat pump, that goes back to what the city manager was stating, reference to the humidity and the water problems that are going on downstairs. My understanding is this has been brought forward several times. We are now at a point that the officers' quarters downstairs, which sits at the backside of a stairwell that has a door with a dirt area below that, so they're constantly receiving the moisture not only from there but also through the brick wall. We're resorting to using damp rid bags in their closets in order to keep the moisture and the mildew away from their clothing. We're using damp rid boxes in the closets to keep moisture off the equipment that's in there in storage. So I've talked with Steve Joyle, and he was also in support of let's move ahead with the heat pumps and get those situated that we can run stuff through the alley and be able to not affect the outside presentation of the building, but be able to start controlling that moisture with some dehumidification that comes with the heat pump being placed in there. In the past, there's been a dehumidifier that was put in there, but the side effect of that dehumidifier by itself is heat, which means that they have a difficult time in the summertime cooling that space. So there's a trade-off. The heat pump allows them to be able to do both and have that dehumidification process going on at the same time.
And are you confident in that solution in terms of a heat pump? Is that going to resolve the issue, or is it just another Band-Aid that will do some, but it really needs some more extensive work?
It's, and again, the building envelope study did not specifically address the department issues with the water in the fire department. This heat pump is a Band-Aid on a wound that needs surgery, right? So it's gonna need stitches. It's going to provide some relief and provide them, you know, for immediate rectifying the situation of the moisture and the heat and the cooling. But ultimately, long-term, probably a curtain drain or something around the exterior, at least at that end of the building, is going to be needed in order to remove that moisture from the walls, because it's literally seeping in through the walls. And that, again, that's going to be part of a much larger project.
There have been numerous attempts to be able to work with that, with the captain's quarters downstairs. There are additional areas in the building that are seeing the same thing, but the captain's office is the most concentrated because of where it sits in the building in the stairwell. Numerous fixes have been attempted in the past. Like I said, they've used a dehumidifier. They have attempted to strip the paint off the wall and repaint the wall to prevent and kind of put a barrier up. However, as that goes, we can't fix the inside of the building until the outside of the building's fixed. So yes, in a way it is a Band-Aid, but it will give us that time that we need until you guys can move forward with some remediation on the outside of the building.
Is the EMS, ALS equipment for immediate use now, or is that what you're planning for the future for an ambulance when we get one of those?
Yes and yes. So the immediate is for the immediate use now. We have ALS providers that can't perform up to the ALS level. I would like to be able to license later this fall up to the advanced level so that our advanced providers are able to provide the next level of care, especially as a first responding agency with delayed ambulance transports, to be able to put that ALS level of service in the street immediately instead of having to wait 10, 15 minutes for an ambulance to, say, come from a mutual aid area such as Blue Hill. I think being able to provide that level of care is important. It was proposed as part of the capital improvement. However, that is one of the discussions that when we eventually get into the ARPA discussions later on, I think that is a good avenue to follow it also if we don't want to fund it this way.
And then the follow-up for that is the multi-use vehicle. What are you going to use with that? And
So that was a kind of a twofold thing, and this is, I kind of agree with the city manager. I think this is a point that we can probably table this as far as that discussion, but when we purchased the heavy rescue to replace Rescue 5 and Engine 8, and in keeping in fact that we needed a rescue and an engine at the same time, the request was made by council, could we use a smaller vehicle? Well, this is a smaller vehicle. At the same time, it gives us the brush truck capability to handle our brush fires that happen in areas where we can't get engines into. The pickup truck downstairs, that is not an adequate brush truck. That's a couple 100 gallons of water. It's not very useful as far as us being able to provide and have the adequate equipment we need wherever we're going. So I do agree with the city manager. This is something we could possibly push off till later and look at some other avenues moving forward. But the end result was following in line with what you guys had requested. Could we use a smaller vehicle to handle EMS calls? And this is one of those things that allows us to do it, carry the equipment that we need so that we're not having crews out there with just a pickup truck.
And so we're still moving forward with purchasing an ambulance?
Yes, sir. We're waiting to see what the grant process is. Hopefully they'll start doing their awards this month, but it could go as far as September, October, depending on what phase, if we were awarded. So it's a long-term thing, but there's still some long-term planning that I've got in place. If we're not awarded the grant this time, along with applying again, would be setting up a purchase for next fiscal year, at least to get us in line with purchasing one ambulance to get us started if that's the path we choose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get the water or wastewater. Which one do you want?
Let's. I was gonna let you go, Mike, because you always go last.
Knock out the enterprise accounts, and then we'll turn the meeting over to Lisa. No, after you, Mike.
No,
After Mike.
But don't forget yourself now.
Well, I'm gonna be here till the end, so I'll go at the end.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Harris. I am the wastewater superintendent. As far as the capital improvement goes, so I thought that we had taken some stuff off the capital improvement, but apparently then we have not taken it off the capital improvement. So we have a capital reserve that we typically fund every year, $35,000. We have a collection system maintenance program that we've been doing for the last few years to help us start doing repair work and stuff with our collection system. And then the
two new things that I put on this year were a pickup truck for the plant and a placeholder for HVAC project for our heating and air conditioning. And so just to go through really quickly, I mean, the first two are pretty self-explanatory, whether you choose to do it or not to do it. $35,000 reserve account. We have probably $340,000 in there right now. We are going to use a substantial amount of that this year because of the rebuilding that we had to do with some of the components of the centrifuge. The collection system maintenance account, capital project, we have money left from last year they wouldn't use. So in conversations with Glenn and the finance office, if we have to forego those this year because of the challenges we're facing within the current financial environment, then I would completely understand that. With the hope that, especially the capital reserve account, at some point we'd be able to go back to funding that because it's very important to maintain that funding for the problems that we've had, like we had this year, when you have major breakdowns and stuff like that. Because as an enterprise account, you know, that's our fund that we use. And so going on to the other two, so for the pickup truck, on the pickup truck, we have 5 guys in our department. We have 2 trucks. One of them is a 2-wheel drive, 6-cylinder Ford. That is useless in the wintertime. It's not safe to drive in the wintertime, but we do it anyway. Then it's very inefficient for us having 5 people in our department and only 2 vehicles. So the thought process would be to add another vehicle and keep the 6-cylinder vehicle. And the 6-cylinder vehicle, its best use for me is like if we had to take trips to Bangalore to pick up parts or take motors up there that need to be repaired, things like that. Maybe if we have to go to class or a conference somewhere. That's when you take the 6-cylinder vehicle, and it serves a good purpose as far as that goes. But we currently have a plow truck that I have. And so currently in the wintertime, whenever there's a storm, I'm always the one that comes in and plows. And then I come in and plow after hours during the storm. And then in the morning following, somebody would end up having to take that vehicle and go out and plow the 9 pump stations we have, or 8 pump stations, soon to be 9. And so at that point, you're stuck with a 2-wheel drive, 4 guys, and if there's an issue, you're gonna have to use it. And then we had a situation last winter, or the winter before, at Main Street and High Street, where we had a manhole break. And we had to stop traffic, and we had to go up there and repair it. I had the big truck up there for that, and then we had to go try and find a replacement rim and cover to put on the manhole. So the guys went to one of our pump stations, in the two-wheel drive, got stuck, couldn't get out. So I had to go pick them up, bring them back. We made it through the repair. We didn't put a plate on, a rim on it and cover. We ended up plating it. And then the next day we had to go try and pull the pickup truck out, the 2-wheel drive, at which point we had a chain snap and smacked into the back end of the pickup truck and damaged the taillight, and it's just a useless vehicle in the wintertime, I'm sorry. We have snow tires on it. We have a big bucket of salt that we put in the back of it to dry around all winter. But, you know, that plus the number of people we have, we could really use another pickup truck. So, and as far as the HVAC goes, we currently, when the plant was built, there was 4 heat pumps installed and there was 2 boilers installed. Heat pumps were primarily for cooling and heating the plant and all surrounding buildings. And the boilers were for backup heat source for that and also for the domestic hot water and the radiant inflow heating that we have in the administration building. We're currentently down to 1 heat pump, 1.5 heat pumps that function. The other heat pumps are completely non-functional. And 1 boiler has a hole in the chamber. It's not fixable, and the boiler's obsolete, so they don't even make those anymore. So we have 1 working boiler. I've had multiple agencies, companies come up to try and evaluate replacing heat pumps and the boilers. with little success. I just had a meeting the other day with Johnson & Johnson, Johnson Controls, actually the owner of Johnson Controls. And so now we are exchanging information with them. And then XL, which is another big HVAC company, is supposed to send somebody over this week to look at it for us. We've had Thayer, who handles all the City Hall stuff, come look at it. Still hasn't gotten back to us with an alternative. ABM Mechanical came. They're the ones that actually cleaned the boilers and found the problem with the other boiler. They have not given us a proposal. Mechanical Services came down. They have not given us a proposal. Coastal Energy won't do it. So, I mean, there's been multiple attempts to have contractors come in and give us a replacement cost. I don't have a replacement cost for you, so I put a placeholder in there of $150,000. Do I think it's gonna cost $150,000? I have no clue. But just to give you some sense, if you look at the amount of propane we used when we were not on the heat pumps as opposed to when we were on the heat pumps, it is significant. So I also raised the propane budget in the event that we don't get heat pumps, or we have to go to boilers. You're gonna spend a lot of money on propane, like probably 4 or 5 times, I guess. So I would prefer to get the heat pumps for the backup boilers like you have it. The only recommendation that I am looking to make, if this whole thing goes forward, is that instead of using our effluent as the water source for the heat pumps, which is what we did when we built the plant, that seems to be one of the biggest causes of their failure. We would go to a closed loop glycol system that doesn't have to worry about contamination and foreign substances getting in and fouling the condensers and things like that. And so I've conveyed that to Johnson Controls. I will convey that to Excel when they come this week to look at everything. And obviously it would be up to the council if they wanted to go that way or to continue to try and use our effluent to be the water source. And we can have it priced both ways and see what the difference is.
Any questions?
Thanks for giving us no good alternatives. Appreciate it.
I cut a lot of stuff out.
You can do this, or you can do this.
I took the septic transfer thing out. I took a couple of things out. And I'll ask for them again.
You're done, you're done, go away, go
All
away.
right.
Reggie.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Reggie Winslow, Water Department Superintendent. So I have in there a truck for this year. This will be replacing a 2015 two-wheel drive pickup.
Give it to Mike.
Is yours useless too? Is your two-wheel drive useless?
Two-wheel drive, 6-cylinder. We live in Maine. So I'm asking for a van this year. This will be our primary vehicle to do service orders, front-wheel drive. So hopefully much better than a two-wheel drive.
I'm sorry, you said a front-wheel drive van?
It'll be a front-wheel drive van, yes.
How big a van?
3/4 ton.
Okay.
The next thing I have is analyzer redundancy. So our current analyzers that monitor our chlorine, turbidity, and everything, we do not have a backup for that if one of those systems fail. Also to add that our current turbidimeters are about 15 years old and we can no longer get parts for them. So replacing them slowly will be part of that analyzer. The Surrey Road project that you have on there can be removed. That is not going to happen this year. That'll be next year.
So, question with the Surrey Road.
Yep.
Because this has been on there several years.
Keep trying.
So, so the $3 million price tag with that, that's doing the whole project. That's not engineering. That's start to finish.
The whole project.
So that's my question is there is there work that needs to be completed in order to move the project forward? Because what I keep seeing is the complete project, and it keeps getting pushed off because of a $3 million price tag. And so that, it goes to my earlier point, is this would strike me as a phased project. Where are we with it? Or am I wrong with it?
So at this point, engineering has been approved for by the drinking water program. So the drinking water program will fund the engineering, the drawing for that project. So once that is done, then we can move forward. And Lisa's gonna explode.
No, that's what I was here, whoa, that's really loud. That's what I was here for last month, when I asked to accept the $157,000
So
from the
that's what
drinking
that
water
is.
program. Is the drinking water program is going to pay for us to engineer it for free as a grant. Once it's engineered, we get more points. We made the backup list for, the drinking water program accepts applications for projects they're gonna fund. We made the backup list. But because I have extra funds this year, they said, well, you're on the backup list, but we're gonna give some free money to get it engineered. Because if you have an engineered project, it scores more points, which puts you in a better position to be on the primary list next year. So that's why we're putting it off a year.
So there may be funds that we might be able to get to contribute to this.
We could get some
And-
more grant funds, principal forgiveness, all that stuff through the drinking water program. And we're gonna utilize their free engineering money to help us hopefully get more of their free money.
It's a great answer.
I never give that much detail. So I believe this is the last thing on there. This is the Birch Street water main replacement. So the crew spent several days in the cold on Birch Street, repairing a water line. So the existing water line is old galvanized and it's full of holes. We had a very hard time finding a good place to make a proper connection to stop the leak. So I would like to start uphill from the railroad tracks and continue that line with a brand new section all the way around and connect it into Parker Street, also creating a loop system.
And it would be a larger line?
So it'll be the same diameter pipe,
Yeah,
but it'll be one or two pieces versus the 5 or 6 we have in there. But also it'll have feed from the other side, so the volume will still be there or improve.
this was in front of my house last winter. Cold, miserable days those guys spent there. I saw the pipe that they took out. He's being polite when he says full of holes.
I can bring it in a piece in a piece.
It was, I don't know how much water went into houses versus how much water ran out the holes into the ground.
Maybe we can park all the vehicles for you.
So this, no joke here, the clay that is surrounding the pipe is actually what's holding most of it together.
He's not whistling Dixie.
Council Helen.
Where are you coming up with this cost? It sounds like quite a project for $88,000.
So it's all gonna be 2-inch CTS, which is much, much cheaper than, but again, so, and these numbers were quotes that I got a few months ago.
And
And Highway's gonna hopefully do the work.
Okay, all right.
So
Thank
they've
you.
got some work to do
All
in
right.
that area, so it could be a joint thing.
Because it just seems like a lot of
Very
work
low.
for $88,000.
No, I agree with it.
You said 2-inch CTS, what does that stand for?
It's copper tubing size plastic.
Reggie, what's the lifespan on something like that? Any idea?
CTS has a pretty long, I can't give you an exact number, but it's, the new ductile iron pipe is slated for 105 years, so I really don't know.
Just say it how Mike would say it.
The mic does pick up everything you say, just so you.
Oh, that's good.
All
I prefer cautious.
So, again, kind of a glaring omission, which I know why it's not on there, because it's not ready to go, but one of the largest projects that the city has is related to the water department is replacing the water plant, the facility itself, correct?
Yes.
We've been talking about that for a number of years in terms of, one, it was the lagoon, but now it's really, the entire plant needs to be replaced. And so again, this is, I know it's not for this year, but I do think that the discussion in terms of what that looks like from your perspective in terms of how many years out, what do we need to do as a city? And I'm not asking you tonight, but it's such a big project that if we don't address it, it becomes something that is a real liability for the city. So I just, that's something that I think needs to get in front of a council, whether it's this council, the next council. It's a major issue.
Again, last council meeting, part of the drinking water program was funding for plant design and lagoon design. So I'm hoping the project will, get started in 3 years, but it's probably looking more like 5.
So, I just wanted to pop in one more thing. So what you see in front of you, and this will pertain to myself for, it was Mike, Reggie, of the Public Works Department, is what you see in front of you is just our request for this year.
Mm-hmm.
We all have a 5-year plan that we've put together, that you're not seeing the whole package, we're just giving you the 1 year's glimpse. So the plan is on our radar, you're just not seeing it.
Yeah, for me, it's just helpful to be able to have that connection. That's why I said it earlier this
Yep.
evening, is to know that this piece is related to this or not. But if it is connected, I think it's helpful to have that. And as you know, I mean, there's so much that happens, and the councils change and people change on the council every year. And so to have that constant, this is what we're moving the project, it started here, this is what we need this year to take it to the next level. It's important to have that, otherwise those decisions sometimes aren't connected. And that's why I say it. That's why it's important to keep saying how it's related.
Right, so, that's up to Glenn and conversation we can all have, but going forward, is it better off to, we try to limit it to the 1 year, right? But we can make you a 5-year, right?
No, I'm not saying to give me the 5-year, I'm saying that, like, for this, you would say, okay, we're asking this year, this is the second step of a 5-year project.
Got it.
Just so that there's a connection to why it's requested. A vehicle it needs to be replaced. That's different than a piece of a larger project. And just reminding us what that is.
Like we're in phase 2 of such
Right,
and such.
yeah.
Yep, okay.
That makes sense.
Sorry, thanks.
I believe that's it.
That is it.
Any other questions?
Questions?
Comments? All right.
All right. You're up, Lisa. I'm gonna turn the podium over to you.
So if possible, can we do highway first so that Adam can then leave?
Yep. Start with highway.
I was gonna
Okay.
say no, but that's all right.
So if you look at, on the left side, the number of projects she submitted, and what I've brought forward is tilt deck equipment trailer, new or addition, replacement of a plow truck, and the upgrade radios, which actually that figure can be reduced to 38,000. But certainly she has other needs as well that will.
Well, I think it was gonna be reduced to 38.7 or something, but I was going to ask to only reduce it to 40. So that, some of the vehicles that we wanna put these new radios in may need some antenna work or some additional work from Brown's. And so I didn't wanna take myself out of the ability to give everything, what it needs.
And just a little bit of background on that radio upgrade. So most of you will probably remember, we switched to a DMR radio system within the police department. Fire department is now on that system. It was always the intent to bring the highway department as well. And that ensures consistency and uniformity and ability for our highway plow drivers to communicate with dispatch. And so this is just seeing that final step of that process.
And the reduction is just some radios that we'll be getting from the police department as they swap some stuff out. So we'll get their year-old radios, no big deal. The tilt deck trailer, that is something that was not originally on our 5-year plan, but came to fruition because our current tilt deck trailer, the axles basically fell out of it about a year ago, and we attempted, last May, so yes, just over a year. We've been for a year trying to get replacement parts, and we could not get them. So at this point, we want to just buy a new one and trade in the one we got for whatever it's worth. And the plow truck, this is, something when we had our original operations budget, we had a discussion about that. Vehicle equipment maintenance and costs and that kind of thing. And it is absolutely crucial that we continue to fund trucks on a yearly basis so that we don't run into extensive repair bills. Just looking at this particular truck, in the last 3 years, so FY 20, 21, 22, we have put over $40-some thousand into this truck in 3 years. Yes.
Could you tell me what this truck is?
Yep, it's a single axle, 2013 plow truck.
Which I'm gathering that this highway truck would replace that, is that?
Correct.
Okay.
It'd be, yep. It's a replacement. It'd be the truck, the plow gear, truck and, the whole plow assembly and the chassis. Said this last few years, it's been over $40,000 in repairs. It had extensive, so anybody who's familiar with internationals, they had a rash of years where they had what I'm gonna call subpar trucks that they built, and we have a rash of them. And we have, I think, 2 left. Well, this is Kevin's truck, your truck comes, so there's 2, I think we have 2 left. We have 2 left right now, because yours is the 14. So, we're down to getting rid of the last of what I'm gonna call like the lemon type trucks, that have cost us 30 to 40. No. Because we have the 13 and we have the 14. Okay, sorry.
So with this one that you're requesting, obviously supply and all of that.
Yep.
Would you be ready to have the specs go out the door July 1 so that you can start the process?
We could, if I ordered it right now, I texted him today and said, okay, if I ordered a truck today, when would I have it? If I ordered it today, it would not be built until April of 2023. So if I wait until July, I will be looking at probably July, August, September of 2023. That's just for the chassis to be built. Then it's got to go to HP Fairfield and get fitted up, which means if I order one July 1 of this year, I probably won't have it to plow in 23, 24.
And what brand truck is this?
That's international.
You're gonna stick with international?
What's that?
You're gonna stick with international?
If I go out to bid, it'll be what it'll be, right? But international tends to come in the cheapest.
So what's important here is that we're talking about, this is 2 seasons away.
Correct.
If this gets approved. And that's what we're looking at, is really we're talking about 2 years out, and hopefully we'll get through the winter. It's not ideal, but we're not expecting to be able to do the thing quicker. And if we don't approve it, then we're talking probably 3 seasons out.
Correct. Any delay in this pushes us back 2 and 3 years versus 1 year. I mean, we're already a year behind just because of manufacturers.
Is this a single axle, tandem axle?
Single axle.
Single axle. The existing single axle, does that have a pusher on it? It doesn't, so it's just a single axle.
Yep.
Was that, I don't know what that, when you say, does it have a pusher, what,
A single drive axle on the rear, and some of the single axles have pushers, which is an axle that comes down in front of that to take weight, but there's no drive.
thank you.
It's like a drop axle, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want me working on it, any of your vehicles?
So those are the ones that are brought forward. The other ones, they're things we can use, things we need, but honestly, at this point, the truck and the tilt deck are the two. The radio upgrade is, gets us compliant with everybody, or, be able to talk to dispatch and stuff, which is a safety benefit, but, the truck and the tilt deck are definitely top priorities.
Do you think there's any potential for any trucks to be available? Would you do a scan to see if there's anything available?
We would. There's the potential to, I asked the question if I went out to bid, what would be the soonest I'd have it. There is a potential to maybe do, as we've been lucky to find some, in the queue kind of type things. It's possible, but it wouldn't be the bid scenario. It'd just be a direct purchase, essentially.
Questions?
I have one. Could we just talk about this generator and floor drain replacement?
Yep.
On the wish list here. This would complete the project that was 50 grand or so last year to upgrade the
Generator, yep.
electrical.
Yeah, I reallocated the French drain, or the floor drain money to set up for the generator project, yes.
And that project is done.
It's in the process. It's not
Process.
quite done yet.
Same problem as everybody else, we have a lot of issues getting the parts, so that's holding him up a little, but it's well underway.
Yep.
And remind me, that was 50 grand,
Yep, somewhere in there, yep.
right? 47, 50 grand. So if you were able to get this 85,000 bucks, that would finish that project, or maybe of the floor drain and the generator, which would be a priority?
Probably the generator, yeah.
But you have generators.
Well,
They're not on demand.
Right, it's not
But
on
when the
demand,
new-
but once we finish the part that we have right now, it will allow us to plug into the existing generators that are parked out there for the fire department.
So that's why it was not a priority.
Right.
To answer your question, because I know it was a priority last year because the existing generation that they had wasn't able to power the entire facility.
Right.
Once it's all rewired, the larger exterior ones that aren't on demand, but they do have the capability of plugging it in, and that will run the entire facility.
And that's assuming those aren't needed somewhere else, is that?
Correct.
Did I hear that?
Yes,
Back
because
then.
they're supposed to be, I believe, for emergencies, like if the hospital
Right, right.
or the old folks home or something of that, more so than the garage. But more often than not, it would be available.
Gotcha. I just hate half projects, that's all.
That, to get to where we're at with this last project is really the bulk of making it so that we can hook up, so.
Okay.
You want to address the transfer station?
Yep, so, same thing with transfer station. Honestly, the forklift is in there to be replaced. This is just kind of something that needs to be done eventually. It's currently working just fine, so I'm okay with pushing it off a year. Don't have any issues with that, knowing the city is obviously gonna make priorities. The one thing that the loading ramp project is actually really a safety concern. The ramp that we use, there used to be 2 box trailers for our loading ramp. We actually got rid of them when ADD went away, because they helped us rent one of them. We are, as I've been up here telling you guys, our recycling has exponentially grown. We're running out of space. We're running out of ramp room. Our barricades or bracings across the concrete loading ramp dock area have fallen off, basically rotted off. Some of our safety features are gone or just about gone. So the project was to replace the safety railings, purchase another storage type container, whether it's another box truck or something like a storage container, much like Mr. O'Halloran has, something of that nature.
Not from me.
No. But something of that nature, and to widen the ramp area, because when the forklift comes out of the box trailers, it's just a really narrow concreted path, and sometimes in the winter he'll get stuck in the mud or in the ice because he has to back off onto the grassy, muddy type thing. And so it'd be just making that all around safer, and additional storage for all the recycling we have. So that's what that one is.
And since you're there, why don't we get right into local roads?
So, are you going, or are you? Okay. So local roads, this is the first time that we've broken it down by road. In the past, I've given you roads, but it's been a lump sum type dollars. I will tell you right now that these numbers are based off last fiscal year's prices, and the prices on everything has gone up substantially, so these are not particularly great numbers for each individual road anymore. They will be different. That being said, I guess, what questions do you have, I guess, on the local road side of it? Because that's probably the easier way to do it.
Every time I see local roads, I always see Happy Town Road. How extensive is that project?
So Happy Town has been on the, kind of to Steve's point, we break things into pieces, right, to try to spread the wealth essentially throughout different sections of town. We never just sit on one road and go the whole distance, because that would probably eat up the whole budget for 1 year. So we've broken, we've done Branch Pond, we've done Winkenpaw, we've done a bunch of them in chunks. Gary Moore Road, same thing. We do quarter-mile sections at a time. Happy Town Road has 2 sections done. I believe there's 2 sections left. So it'd be one more section this fiscal year, and then potentially another section next fiscal year. Happy Town Road is also a long road, so you'll see it pop up back again for another different section, probably 2 or 3 years down the road. It's a fairly substantial amount of paving.
Is this, so, I know the different types of projects in terms of the extent. Is this, what's involved with these roads? Is it just?
So, going down the list, I can tell you, how I have it right now is Holt, Argonne, Western would all just be overlays, which would be.
There's more supporting document near the end of that section in your book for local roads.
I can look at that.
So, so anyway, the first 3 would be overlays, which is just like, we're basically the last, what we call lift of pavement was never done. So those streets were redone and they only did 1 layer of pavement instead of 2. This is finishing what should have been done, I don't know, however many years ago, and sealing everything back up to hopefully preserve it for another 15 years or so. It's more of a preventative maintenance, because doing it for $18,000 is a lot better than doing it for $180,000. Grant Street, Happy Town Road are full reclamations, which means I'm grinding the existing pavement and repaving because they've deteriorated to that point. Water Street and Foster Street are what we call mill and fills, which is kind of middle of the road. We're milling off the top 1.5 inches or so and then replacing it. It's a 10, 12-year fix. Jude Lane is essentially repaving the whole thing, so we would pull the pavement, repave the whole road. We wouldn't have to go back to Jude Lane for another 30 years. The walking trail grant match is something that you guys committed to for the walking trail project. So that is basically that match.
That's the bike path?
The bike pedestrian path, yep. Drainage upgrade / bulk culverts, that's kind of just your random drainage project, and actually, that's just buying some culverts to continue to do some of the work that we need to do in prep for a lot of these paving projects. Stream crossing match, that is for the, don't get these confused, not the Mill Dam culvert we came for, but the Red Bridge Road culvert that we looked at replacing. That's a match for the 125 that we're getting from the DEP. Drainage mapping, the local roads committee met. The number one thing everybody took out of it is drainage, which is the absolute biggest and most important thing to any road, is getting the water out of it, away from it, and keeping it away from it.
Driven into our heads.
So that is, we are working with Woodard and Curran to map our system so that we can engineer our system, because everything drains to the river and you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. Because if you increase the size of pipes up top of the hill and the bottom of the hill can't handle it, you start blowing things out. So a lot of our systems are very old. They're underneath buildings, houses, garages, everywhere. And so it's a plan to get everything onto a Google Map type scenario that we can actually use iPads out in the field and GPS locate everything. And we can pull up to a manhole and we'll know the size of the manhole, the pipes in it, how old they are, well, essentially how old they are, and have a really good asset management program. That's what that is. It also helps for planning and other things, you know, even building houses. You know if you can tie your basement drain into it or not. The Down East Highway up by the pet store and down at the harbor, we want to do some sidewalk extensions up by the pet store. The highway department did some drainage work up there and prepped it for doing some paving to make it a sidewalk. So that's what that is. As well as Mark Remick noted, the sidewalk in the front of the harbor needs some repair. And so that's what that is. And then contingencies and emergencies and that kind of thing.
I had two questions. One is the Grant Street one, sorry. Is that one that's a part of the Grant Street?
Correct.
Yeah. And then for all of these together, is that like how much money we're spending on that? Sort of the usual amount of money we spend on fixing the roads in any given year, or more or less?
Normally I get somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000.
Okay.
So I'm asking for more than double that.
Council Light.
The stream crossing grant match, this is 600,000, that's to replace that culvert.
That is the big culvert, the Red Bridge over the Branch Lake Stream.
So, I guess my thought is, why would it cost 88,000 to build kind of a bridge over the other end?
We're just putting a head wall on the Mill Dam one, we're not bridging it. We're just putting a concrete head wall. We're not putting concrete over the actual whole thing.
What are they putting in there for? They gotta be able to drive over it.
Gravel, it'll stay, so the road, the culverts will stay, we're not replacing the culverts.
Oh.
The gravel is still gonna be there. We're just taking, like if you were looking at the if you were standing in the stream looking at the culverts, the whole front of it's gonna be concrete, so that when the gush of water
So on the
hits
two
it-
sides of the road is gonna be concrete, not,
Only one side.
Right, well, no, both sides.
Both sides.
Yep, so if you're looking at it, it'll be concrete, 2 culverts, and then gravel up top.
Council Blanchett.
Lisa, while I have you right here,
Yes.
2 questions. You-
Oh, no, sorry, one side of the road, both sides of the culverts.
Just the right-hand side.
So if you're looking at the culverts, it's the right-hand and left-hand side, but it's not both sides of the roadway. It's not the entrance and the exit.
I'm confused.
I can draw it for you.
You spoke a minute ago of, on Holt, Argonne, and Western Avenue putting the final coat on to protect it for another, what was it, 15 or 30
20
years?
plus years, yeah.
So as far as road protection, last year, it was approved in your budget of crack sealing.
Yep.
I haven't seen any yet.
No, because
Is that-
funny thing is we went to this thing called the Highway Rodeo last Thursday,
Yeah.
and the highway department went. It's the American Society, or Public Works Association puts it on. But anyway, it's a bunch of vendors and stuff that we look at, equipment and materials and that kind of thing. And come to find out, you can actually rent one of those crack machines. So guess what? The highway department's gonna learn how to do this summer. We're gonna rent a crack sealing machine and we're gonna do it ourselves.
Okay. And second question, a lot of people have asked me, the cookie cutter machine,
Yep,
is that gonna be out and about this summer?
hopefully, at some point, if we can catch up with all the things that are,
If you give me a can of red spray paint, or lime yellow,
oh,
color
I'm
of your
sure we know
choosing,
which ones. So we
I
did a
can-
bunch of them on High Street last year. There's plenty more to do, but I will tell you that the DOT is coming in 2024
Yes.
to mill and pave that road, so it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to spend a whole lot of time out there when they're gonna come back and jackhammer them out in a year and a half.
It does, if there's gonna be 2 more driving seasons of going over those, they do a number on a car. And at $150 an hour now for automotive labor at a lot of these garages, I think we can save the taxpayer a bit of money by fixing some of those. There's some on Main Street. Some of them have been, I'll use the word fixed, just
Paved over,
paved
yep.
over.
If I had an unlimited time mark, I'd fix them all.
Okay, just, but High Street is bad. So,
Council Miller.
anyway,
Yeah, I just wanted you to go over how he came up with the names of the roads that you were gonna do. It was, from the local roads committee, because I'm
Yep.
sure there's a lot of people out there, why my road's not on,
Right.
why isn't it?
Yep.
So it was from the local roads committee.
Yep.
And this is basically how we're gonna get the most bang for our buck.
Correct. So, we talked at the local roads committee that, we beat into this drainage. We really need to look at our drainage situation before we start spending a lot of money repaving or rebuilding roads that have subpar drainage underneath them. One of the ones I hear the most about is Christian Ridge Road. Well, we've already got a plan for that. We've got an MPI grant through the state that we're working on. I think the surveyors are actually supposed to be out here this week. So we sat at the local roads committee and we said, okay, if we need to look at all this drainage, what outside of the big drainage corridors can we do that are beneficial? So while we do this drainage mapping and get a handle on our drainage. And that's what, these are the roads that we came up with. We don't disagree that, a lot of the key roads, Water Street, State Street, Oak Street, some of the bigger roads need stuff, but they need the infrastructure on top of just being paved.
So, I have a question real quick, and this kind of goes to what Councilor O'Halloran stated earlier. What is your confidence level, Lisa, that considering, all things considered, the availability of companies for this type of work, that in the next fiscal year we'll be able to accomplish all of these projects? Or are we essentially budgeting funds that we're not going to be able to get to the project based on availability of your own people, but also pavers and folks who you don't have control over?
Yep, so most of these are already ready from the highway department. Water Street will be more of a challenge. Foster Street could be potentially a challenge, but it's much needed. A lot of it can be done. I've been in talks with, and I don't know if you've had a discussion or not with anybody, but Northeast Paving, which used to be Lane, have a Hancock plant here, just down the road. Last year when I put out an RFP for paving, they were the only ones that responded. Previous to that, the year before that, Wellman Paving and Northeast Paving were the only two that responded. Well, Wellman Paving is basically, I don't want to say they're out of business, but they're not competitive anymore. They had a tragedy. So Northeast Paving we've had a conversation, and it's just a conversation at this point, that they would be willing to essentially extend our contract that we have for this fiscal year into next fiscal year with some rate increases that would save us going out to bid and could potentially get us work done sooner, because I could just, instead of having to waste the time to put out an RFP, get back to bids, then make a council meeting, and all these other things, we could potentially move up on their schedule and get some of this stuff done this summer/fall instead of having to wait till spring. So I'm fairly confident, if I got the full, even if I got the full 1.7, I'm not gonna get all these done just because of the price increases. So stuff is gonna have to get cut. But I'm fairly confident that the majority of them could get done.
All right. Thank
Any
you.
other questions? I think that's it. Are you ready, Lisa?
One left.
I think that's it.
Councilor O'Halloran.
I have one question, and perhaps this is more for Glenn. You've got total roads for 1.7 million, and then it says total city departments and local roads on your side is 2.9 million, and on Glenn's recommendation is 2.1 million. Can you help me understand that?
That includes the previous section of total city requests.
Yeah, so that's all of the capital requests that I brought forward as priorities.
Okay. Gotcha.
Less, not including water and wastewater, because they're in.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
So the final department is the police department, and I initially submitted 3 capital requests, body cameras for $73,000, cruiser purchase and equipment for $125,000, and vehicle radio purchase. The vehicle radio purchase is not necessary, and the body cameras at this time are not a priority for us, so I did not bring those forward. So we're left with the purchase of 2 cruisers with equipment, and essentially the police department has been on ever since 2016, has been on a 2 cruiser a year cycle replacement. That's allowed us to keep our maintenance budget in check. We've consistently spent around $20,000 in maintenance over the last 5 years, based on the fact that we have newer vehicles and our vehicles aren't aging in excess of 100,000 miles. This purchasing 2 is going to allow us to replace 2 frontline vehicles, patrol cruisers, and one of which will be around the 100,000 mile mark. The other one will be less than 100,000. And those vehicles will be cycled out. If we replace 2, one of the 2 will come and replace my vehicle, which is currently at 108,000 miles. And by the time we get new vehicles, we'll likely be in the 120,000 mile range. And then the other one has a potential number of uses. One is for an additional code vehicle, as they currently frequently have to split and go in different directions. So one of them is using their POV. And then the school department for HCTC in the past has expressed an interest in purchasing a cruiser that we're no longer using for their law enforcement program. So that's something that we looked at doing last year, but neither of the vehicles we traded out last year met the needs of the school, so we didn't go in that direction last year with those vehicles, but is an option that we could explore with one of the 2 vehicles if we were to trade in, get 2 new ones. Trade-in value we've seen in the past has not been worthwhile for the city. Anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 is typical trade-in, and the vehicles have more value than that to the city in other departments, have proven to have more value in other departments. We would explore, obviously, the potential for a trade-in with the bid process, because with the current market, the trade value may be higher, in which case it may make more sense to trade the vehicles, which in the past just hasn't been the case, so.
Question, you took out body cams, but, you know, with the rise of the opiate epidemic, and now we're seeing a lot of methamphetamines, cocaine, et cetera, and incidents surrounding that, would it not make sense to have those body cams?
Well, we haven't, in the Ellsworth Police Department, we haven't seen the need. We have cruiser cameras in all of our cruisers, which have audio packs that the officers are very, very adept at using, and whenever possible, having the camera, pointed in their general direction. There's a lot of different technology out there for body cameras, so it's something that we need to explore. What are the different options, and something that we'll continue to take a look at. But at this time, it just doesn't, for the price tag attached to them, we haven't seen the need for our officers and to have the body cameras. We have very few citizen complaints. Most of the citizen complaints we have had this year have had video camera from the cruiser, either audio or video, and have been 3 of the 4 officers have been exonerated based on that camera footage. So we don't have a big need for them at this time.
Any foot chases this year?
Not off the top of my head, I can't think of any foot pursuits.
So the fourth, 3 out of the 4 got exonerated. What about the 4th one?
The 4th one was not a citizen complaint. It was an internal policy violation. And that officer was disciplined. But story for another day.
How many officers do we have?
How many officer positions? Well, there's 20 sworn.
Driving officer positions.
Well, they all drive. But we have 15 patrolmen, if that's
And how many vehicles do we have?
13.
So it's almost 1 per officer?
No, because those vehicles, the 13 vehicles include admin vehicles and detectives vehicles. So frontline cruisers, I think we have 7.
So it's 2 officers per cruiser? 1 officer per cruiser?
Yes.
But so in other words, if a cruiser is assigned to this officer in the morning, it's assigned to a different officer in the evening, right?
No, so a couple of years ago, when they purchased 4 cruisers, we were able to assign cruisers to shifts. So it used to be that you would come in and you would get right into the cruiser that the person before you was utilizing. And all of our cruisers had well in excess of 100,000 miles, and they weren't safe. And we had varying different types of cruisers. So one day you may be in a Crown Vic, the next day you're in at the time we had a Expedition, and the next day you might be in a Pontiac that we had. So there's no consistency, very unsafe for vehicles, for vehicle operations, especially in an emergency EVOC situation. So several years ago, we made the additional purchase of vehicles so that we could assign vehicles per shift. So if I work the evening shift and my shift starts at 4 p.m., I come in and that cruiser is assigned to me and and the individual who works opposite me on the evening shift. So that cruiser, during that time, that off time, so until 4 p.m., from 2 a.m. to 4 p.m. the next day, that vehicle is not utilized unless we have vehicles in the shop or we have details which are being completed. Like currently, we have Bureau of Highway Safety money for seatbelts, for speed, for OUI. Those take place during officers working overtime. So during those, I wouldn't be able to come in and get my particular assigned cruiser, so I'd have to use one of the other cruisers that's available. School resource officer is assigned a cruiser to take to the school during the school day. And like currently, one of our cruisers is up at Darlings with an axle removed, and it'll be down for a minimum of 10 days. So if we don't have additional vehicles for those officers to use, then we don't have the capacity for the officers to get where they need to be. A cruiser is also tied up for months on end when we have individuals go to the police academy. We have one slated to go in August, and we'll have another in January. And they utilize a cruiser to go travel back and forth to the police academy. So,
Would it not make more sense to just reimburse their mileage?
well, I guess that depends. I mean, we have the vehicle for other uses. So the vehicle serves more purpose than just them, going back and forth to the academy. But when in fact we do have someone in the academy, they do use one of the vehicles to get back and forth.
Okay, thanks.
What are you guys buying for cruisers?
These are Explorers.
Didn't you find out last year, though, that the pickups and they get like 5 times as much trade-in value?
Yeah, so the Tahoes do. We haven't had any experience yet with the pickups. But the Tahoes do, but GM has suspended production of the Tahoes, so we won't be able to get one, even if we wanted one. We've also found with the Tahoe that we have that, although it's a very nice vehicle, it's not as well suited for urban type of patrol as the Crown Vics, as the Explorers are, because it has a longer wheelbase. So turning on some of our tight roads is more difficult, and it's a bigger vehicle. So we've found that for our urban type of patrol, which is predominantly what we do, the Explorers are a better vehicle for that purpose. And again, we don't have, I would say, a similar situation with the truck, but we don't have specific data on trade-in values of the trucks yet, because those Ford F-150s are relatively new, the police package ones. But I would say that also for consistency, the frontline patrol vehicles, I like to keep all the same, because then every day, every shift, you're getting in the same vehicle that handles the same. I'd hate to see an officer who's familiar with and used to driving an Explorer get into the F-150 and get into a pursuit in a vehicle that they're not familiar with and not used to driving. So I think for consistency purposes, the Explorer that we do have, the truck we do have is currently assigned to supervisors. So it's used by the sergeant and a corporal. So they are familiar, that's the vehicle they use. And again, they're not frontline patrol. So the likelihood that they're going to get into a pursuit situation is much less than the frontline patrol. And the Tahoe is assigned to the K-9, so that's a very specific vehicle.
Whatever happened to that EV grant that was given last year?
Yeah, so Environmain, the grant that I originally came forward with, that you all approved, that was going to be a 0 lease for 3 years for the EVs. At the time after it was approved, when we contacted dealers throughout the state and actually throughout New England, there were none available that met the parameters of the grant. So any EV that we could have gotten would have been additional cost, so there would have been cost to the city. That grant from Environmain has since been, the dollar amount has since been dramatically reduced. So we could pursue electric vehicles for some department in the city. I don't think police is appropriate at this point, but we could pursue them for other departments in the city, but it's going to come at a cost. The zero cost lease is no longer an option.
All right, so, with that said, let me throw out a couple suggestions. Obviously, we need to meet again, in terms of, we could just wait until the June meeting and vote on the budget, but to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. We haven't had a chance to really talk with one another, to discuss issues, debate them, see where we differ, see where we can come to some consensus. And so I would propose that we meet next Monday, same time if that works for everybody. And that first part, we'll hear just debt service real quick on that. But then just if we each come prepared to say, this is the change I'd like to see with this budget, whether it's adding, subtracting, to identify for each of us to be able to say, this is what I would like to see different, then we can have a discussion about that. We don't make any decisions in workshops, but it gives us an opportunity to understand what our thinking is and perhaps work through some of those issues before the vote. Because once the vote happens, we'll be voting on the budget that's in total. During that meeting, the council always has opportunities to amend that, that main motion and get into the weeds of things there as well. But it would certainly be in I think our best interest and the community's best interest if we have an opportunity to talk amongst the council in greater detail. So that's what I would propose to do next Monday, and want to get reaction to that.
That sounds good. I have a question. When we, running it, I'm just trying to see if I understand it correctly. At the end of the day, we're gonna vote one vote for the whole entire budget. But within that, there are like mini votes to amend, like, well, I think this much should be this much, or?
Well, that's the discretion that like any motion. So the motion that will be presented, hopefully, so let's say next week we come to some consensus of, boy, let's remove X from the budget. And there's some consensus. What Manager Mosier will do with his team is he'll amend the budget and he'll come with a budget. He'll come with, this is the budget based on what he's heard our discussions. At that meeting, any counselor can make a motion. A counselor could make the motion to approve the budget as is, and that could then be amended. Obviously, we'll have discussion prior, so there could ongoing discussion, and you might say, well, I would like to add this back in, it's not there. And you kind of see what the consensus is.
So the final motion can be kind of messy.
It can be inclusive, but the staff will be here to adjust that, so after we have that discussion, whatever's added, subtracted on that Monday, they'll be able to say, okay, here's the new total. This is the budget, this reflects those changes, and that's what we're voting on. So, but the more we can do in advance, the better.
The less messy
It's
it will
much,
be.
yeah, we'd rather, that's what workshops are for, is to kind of work through the mess, so that we have some sense of what that we have some agreements going forward. Councilor Howard.
I just have a question. I've seen this process only once. As you know, this is all brand new to me. I noticed that the school budget was voted on in total. Why is it that each department doesn't have their own vote? In other words, the fire department, do we approve the budget, do we not approve the budget? The library, whatever. I mean, it seems like one section, which is a big section, is segregated, but then we group all the departments together. Is there a reason for that, or can it be, I'm not asking it for change, I'm asking, is there a reason, or in the future, could it be, if this council agreed to it, line item by department?
So I'll just give you my perspective and then open it up for others. But just my involvement is that it sort of is that's what we're doing in the workshop. We do, essentially, there's the school budget, which is, yes, it's a big, but by charter, we only have top line vote, so we can't get in the weeds. With the municipal budget, we can get in the weeds, and we have control over every line item. So we can, the council can go through any process the council chooses in terms of voting on that. Obviously, getting into each line item is quite an exhaustive process. Taking it by department, that's sort of what I hope we do next meeting, is that we talk about, okay, I'm not happy with the fire department. I think the fire department should do X. And then we talk about that. And so that's the line item process, is to get into the details around that. So that's what I hope that during the workshop, if you have line items that you want to bring forward, bring it there so we can start debating them and discussing them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's critical that, because honestly, last year, through the budget workshops, we came out of the budget workshops with a pretty good idea of what we needed to take out of the budget in order for it to be acceptable. This year, we've gotten really little direction. So I think next week's meeting is going to be critical for myself and the finance staff in particular to be able to trim things out, put things back, whatever the wishes are, consensus is in the room, to be able to submit a budget to you that's gonna be passed without in that June meeting going down into the weeds of the line items. So at this next meeting, yeah, any concerns you have about individual department budgets, you should absolutely bring them up so that they can be discussed in this group. So then because we'll watch the room, and if there's consensus that, yeah, we need to, bring back books for the library, then we'll leave that meeting knowing, okay, we need to work $25,000 back into the library for books in order for the budget to pass. So it's gonna be critical.
Councilor Miller and then Kaplan.
So last year, we also had, going into that last meeting, just based on what we have now, the estimated mill rate for next year. I'd like to just see that next week.
We have that.
And I, for one, it doesn't make sense to have ALS providers working for the fire department without ALS equipment.
Right, but they're not licensed yet, so they can't, even if they had the equipment, they can't perform any tasks because of their license restrictions.
But the equipment that you get now would be less expensive than the equipment you get next year when they are licensed.
So, and that's a piece, the other thing, and Council Blanchett, you've been doing this longer than I have, is in a workshop, we don't take votes, but we can take straw votes. We can kind of ask, what do you think about that? Is anybody in disagree with this proposal, to kind of get a sense of where we stand? And we should do that. That should be part of the process, so we know where an issue stands. If I raise something and the rest of you say, no chance, I mean, then it's not, it's.
Then you're SOL and we
Yeah,
move on.
we move on, and I'm not gonna bring it back to the meeting, because I know it's not gonna pass. So it's that openness of being able to do
The
that.
big thing is being able to have Josh with his calculator and magic fingers down there, running numbers and telling us what that would give us for a mill rate.
Right.
So,
No pressure.
No.
What is the anticipated current mill rate?
Including the full amount of the requested, or the manager's request for this capital improvement, it would be moved from 1803 currently to just under 19, I believe.
It's a big jump.
It was at 1880 the year before, I believe.
Right.
And keep in mind, also, what Larry had talked about, the potential is that valuations will go up. He thought similar to what they did last year, which means that what people pay, unless the tax base has grown significantly in the city, then there would be even if we held it flat, there still would be an increase if we haven't seen an appreciable tax base.
Can you get those numbers for us in like black and white for us to see?
How come we can't have that number before, like Larry, couldn't get that number before you vote on the budget? I mean, so you know what the actual mill rate's gonna be?
Well, his evaluation's not completed yet because he doesn't have to have tax until his
Last year
commitment.
we didn't get it until early August.
Yeah,
I was gonna say,
July.
the end of July, I believe.
Commitment.
I just think it's so unfair to the taxpayer that
Yeah,
based on a real
weird
estate
last
market,
year.
that their taxes are gonna go up when their property really hasn't changed. It's just the location that it is.
Well, but in a
And
perfect world, when the property value goes up, the tax rate falls a commensurate percent, and everything is flat. in a perfect world. Now, if you ask some of the camp owners out on Green and Branch and Patton Pond, they'll disagree with me, and probably correctly so. But when the rate goes up, the assessment goes up, the tax rate falls,
The mill rate may fall.
so.
But I don't know anybody in Ellsworth that has had their taxes drop in the last 5 years.
Mine have.
You're lucky.
How did you manage that? Because I don't know how. I don't know how.
Well, we have the history in terms of the mill rate has not climbed very much
No.
over 5,
Right.
6 years. It's been pretty flat.
Last year went down,
So-
the evaluations went up, so
Right.
the taxes went up.
So
So
there
your
are there are other
taxes went up.
factors. That the mill rate has been, so that myth that I hear all the time is that taxes are going up. The mill rate's been held pretty consistent from year to year for the last 5 years. So it's valuation, that plays a role in it. It's whether homestead exemptions, other exemptions that people have. There are a number of factors that relate to the individual tax bill, but the mill rate we have, and that can be,
Well, I
you
think
can
the
see.
biggest problem with our whole discussion on taxation, I mean, we have, a lot of it is the union contracts, because you're starting with a base of this amount, and you're automatically adding 5%, 10% based on those contracts, based on the benefits, the health insurance, the retirement, the vacation days, buyouts, all this other stuff. You are starting at a base of, let's say, $1 million, and you're automatically going to add 5 or 10%, which means that even if we keep the taxes the same, the services that the city are getting in return for those tax dollars are less and less and less. And it's unfair that we're looking at trying to squeak out roads that's what people are paying for. They're paying for roads, fire, police, et cetera, but they're driving on roads that are crumbling. We've heard about the drainage ditches that are crumbling. So the services that we're actually getting in return are fewer because the equipment that we can buy is less, because the contracts start higher.
Yeah, I don't disagree with those, I think that's our dilemma as a council.
I'm
is-
just
is-
worried
is
at
that
some
we're
point,
Tasked with.
some year, the taxes are gonna have to like double because you're gonna have to fix roads and you're gonna have to fix.
It's, yeah.
It was good that we got a little bit
But
extra.
I guess one thing I would just say to your point, Councilor Kaplan, is without employees, none of that happens.
Right.
So
Right.
if our union contracts are negotiated every 3 years, and the council plays a role, the council accepts or denies the union contracts, and if we don't continue to.
Who does the negotiations? Because I have not been to one union negotiation, not one. And in addition to that, the benefits and nothing against our employees. I value each and every one of them. I know they work hard, but the benefits available to public sector employees far outweigh the benefits to private sector employees. And if you ran a business like this, you'd be bankrupt in no time. Because we've got people last year, we paid out X number of sick days at the current rate that they accumulated over the last 10, 20 years in some scenarios. It's crazy to be paying banking sick time or banking vacation time for future use and paying that out in a big bulk at the end. You don't get that in the private
Well,
sector.
that's not how it works, actually. They receive half of their vacation, of their sick leave upon separation from the city retirement. So you're talking employees who've been with the city for 25 or more years and retire, and they get half of that sick leave. And if you calculate what it costs the city for an employee to take sick leave, then you're paying pennies on the dollar for what it costs if that employee were to utilize every day of their sick leave throughout their 25-year career with the city.
But it's
So, and I would argue also that our current benefit package in the city is not superior to what you would get in the private sector. And currently, with the economy the way it is and private sector jobs the way they are, I would argue that you can benefit, that an employees here in the city of Ellsworth could benefit to going into the private sector.
One of our departments pays $100 for their health insurance. And if you're single coverage, you pay nothing.
No. That's not
I
true.
asked that question directly. And a single person coverage for one of our departments pays nothing towards their health insurance. I don't know of a whole lot of private organizations that do that. And
I'm here to tell
we're
you
not
that's
gonna
not
solve
accurate,
it
because I've
tonight,
negotiated all of the contracts, and there's not a single union contract that has a zero contribution for health insurance.
So,
For a single?
so.
For single,
it-
not one.
This certainly, and that, we obviously won't solve it, but it certainly is something we can bring back to talk about in terms of the process, because there is a council rep that gets appointed to the negotiations, and we always have a rep, we have our attorney, the city attorney, represented. So we can get into that, because it is.
But from what I understand, when you go into the negotiations, you start at this, and you can never take away a benefit. Am I correct? Or you would end up in what you called arbitration.
Well, you
If
can
you
negotiate.
To take it away, no, but you can negotiate.
In fact, so I'll use the last, not this cycle, but the last cycle when the city changed from our POSC health insurance to the PPO 2500 health insurance that we have now. The city did that first started with union contract negotiations, and in order to compensate the employee for that switch, the dramatic switch in quality of health insurance, there was compensation or negotiated things that the employee got in place of the subpar health insurance. So yeah, you can take away a benefit, but it has to come through a negotiation process. And generally, you have to give something else up in order to gain that benefit for the city.
Right now, in a market like this, yes, it's difficult to attract employees, but what happens when you come into a time of recession, and now now you have people screaming for jobs? So it's an unfortunate position now.
I think we're gonna find that out.
Well, and I
Very
think it certainly, and it factors into our discussion next week in terms of overall, it's just part of the challenge, I think, is it's not, this is always the unfortunate piece, because when we talk about employees and compensation and benefits and all of that, it's not intended to malign the people who work for the city. They do a great job.
Not at all.
But there's a reality to it too. And we have to look at the cost on one side and what do you give up on the other, and then if we're not addressing roads, if we don't put money into that, then there's always that perspective of coming back at us, and all we can do is talk about it and try to come up with the best plan that we think, based on the conditions, are right, negotiate that out. We 7 individuals, 7 different perspectives, and hopefully at the end of the day, we'll come up with a budget that we can all support.
Yeah, and my conundrum is that, at times we're looking at tax increases for either better health care or better benefits packages, better retirement, better hours, whatever, and we're taking money from people who are utilizing loaves and fishes, for example, or utilizing the food bank, or utilizing the free health clinic, because they have nothing. I mean, we saw the guy in the brown house couldn't even afford his taxes. And those are the people that we're elected to represent. We're also elected to work with the city and make sure that we do have quality employees. So yes, it is a balancing act, but at the same time, at what point does that balancing act tilt? So now we have crumbling roads, but we have great employees, because we can't purchase the equipment, or we can't purchase the pavement to put down in the first place.
Right.
All right. So, more to come Monday. Thank you.